Chapter 1060. Hearing Lin Jai's words, Xia Shangzhou immediately followed up. Then Boss Lin, I'll head to the study to get the documents I want and leave right away. I won't be saying goodbye to you then. The navigator sure is something to be able to forge it so realistically. Lin Jai had no idea what was going on with her, but she couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. Ignoring Xia Shangzhou, she turned around and headed to the bedroom. As if nothing had happened, Xia Shangzhou turned to Qin Ting with a smile and said, Mr. Qin, I'll be taking my leave then. After which, he entered the study and walked out with an empty paper bag. Lin Jai was still changing her clothes, and Qin Ting was already seated on the sofa in the living room. Before Xia Shangzhou left, he pondered for a moment before bidding farewell to Qin Ting. Hearing his voice, Qin Ting raised his head and glanced at Xia Shangzhou. After a moment of contemplation, he stood up and said, Allow me to send you off, Mr. Xia. There's no need for that, Mr. Qin. Xia Shangzhou replied politely. However, Qin Ting still walked over to him and personally sent him to the door. He even helped him press the elevator. While waiting for the elevator, Qin Ting looked at Xia Shangzhou for a moment before asking warmly, Mr. Xia, will you be free soon? When the time comes, you must attend my wedding with Jai. Wetting Xia Shangzhou's fingers subconsciously tightened around the empty paper bag in his hand. Wedding? Are you two planning to get married? Of course. Didn't Jai tell you? I proposed to her last month. Didn't you see her diamond ring? Oh, that's right. She probably didn't wear it because she just woke up. So in the 70 days that he had been away from her, they had already progressed to the status of an engaged couple. Well, she liked him so much and had liked him for so many years. He had seen that kind of love and persistence. Now that they had finally met again, they were together, and they were going to get married and have children. Naturally, it was only natural. With such thoughts in mind, Xia Shangzhou's lips moved once more. His voice was no different from usual, but he knew very well just how stiff his lips were when he spoke. Congratulations then. After a pause, Xia Shangzhou asked with difficulty, When do you plan to hold the wedding? I haven't confirmed the date yet, but I'm sure Jai will inform you once it's confirmed. Even if Jai doesn't inform you, I'll remind her to inform you as well. When the time comes, Mr. Xia, don't come up with any excuses to refuse to attend the wedding. Qin Ting said half-jokingly. Mr. Qin, you really know how to joke. I'm definitely here to send my blessings to President Lin's wedding. Qin Ting smiled and did not say anything else. The elevator arrived at Lin Jai's floor. When the elevator doors opened, Xia Shangzhou glanced at the half-closed door behind him, then glanced at the smiling Qin Ting. He thought for a moment, then said, Even though you haven't set a date for your wedding, I still want to say one more thing. Mr. Qin, I wish the two of you a happy and blissful marriage. Also, you must treat her well. Xia Shangzhou's throat felt like it was being choked by something, and he could no longer make a sound. Without waiting for Qin Ting to respond, he turned around and entered the elevator. When the elevator doors closed and slowly descended, he continued to think about what he had just said. Chapter 1061. It was only when the elevator finally reached the first floor that Qin Ting turned around and returned to Lin Jai's apartment. A second after he closed the door to the bedroom opened, and a neatly dressed Lin Jai walked out with the latest bag in her hand. Mr. Xia has left. I just sent him off. Lin Jai replied with an indifferent, "Oh," before opening the shoe cabinet. She took out a few pairs of high heels and tried them on in front of the mirror. Finally, Lin Jai chose a pair of high heels that matched the color of her sweater. After which she grabbed her car keys and pushed open the door. Qin Ting followed Lin Jai out. While waiting for the elevator, Qin Ting kept glancing at Lin Jai. In the end, he couldn't help but ask the question that had been on his mind all this while. Jai, do you not like the ring that I gave you? His words were tactful, but Lin Jai understood what he meant. Is he asking me if I've made up my mind about my proposal? Lin Jai didn't respond to Qin Ting's question, but the image of Xia Shangzhou standing in the kitchen, preparing breakfast flashed across her mind. She was already a little hesitant when he proposed to her, but after the meeting with the navigator last night, she felt as if she had been possessed. She couldn't help but feel the urge to apologize to him and return the ring to him. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jai turned to look at Qin Ting. His eyes, his facial features, his lips. They were all the same as in her memory, the same face that she had once loved dearly. But why was it that she couldn't find the feeling she had at the beginning after loving him for so long? Just what was wrong with her? Was it her problem? Or was it him? Seeing Lin Jai staring at him silently, Qin Chuan couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He had thought that everything would go smoothly with his plan, but for some reason, right after he confidently proposed to her, a problem suddenly occurred. He had promised many people that Lin Enterprise would cooperate with them. In fact, he had even promised some people that he would do it this month. The reason why he was so certain was because he felt that she would agree to his proposal. When that time came, as long as he became her fiancé, he could casually greet many of the people in charge of Lin Enterprise and facilitate those collaborations. After all, those people had all given him benefits. Now that he had received the benefits, there was no way for him to proceed with the matter. He was very anxious, but he didn't dare to rush her too much for fear of revealing any flaws. Qin Ting tried her best to maintain the composure on her face as she turned to Lin Jai and said, "It's fine, I'm just asking. We won't be together for long anyway, so let's just take it slow." Hearing Qin Ting's words, Lin Jai heaved a sigh of relief inwardly. When did she start to feel uncomfortable, tired, and stressed out when she was with Qin Ting? She suddenly missed the time when she chatted with the GPS during breakfast in the morning. She could say whatever she wanted, and she could also show her sloppiest and most casual side in front of him. "Jai? What are you waiting for? Get in the car." Chapter 1062. On the way to the Lin Corporation, Qin Ting and Lin Jai chatted idly with one another. Qin Ting asked about the hobbies and situations of the bosses in Beijing. When they were about to reach Lin Enterprise, Lin Jai suddenly understood why she was getting more and more tired of interacting with Qin Ting. In the beginning, Qin Ting was fine with her, but later, she didn't know when it started. Qin Ting's conversations with her all turned to business topics. She was already tired of dealing with work at the company. It wasn't easy for them to meet and have a meal together in private, but he still had to think about business. Over time, she felt that Qin Ting wasn't like her boyfriend, but more like a business partner. Faced with Qin Ting's question, Lin Jai rubbed her temples. She was just about to reply with the "I don't know" when Qin Ting's phone rang. She subconsciously glanced at the screen of his phone, and it was a series of phone numbers. Qin Ting probably didn't know who it was, so he answered the call politely. "Hello, may I know who you are?" "Qin Ting." It was a female voice on the other end of the phone. Her voice was agitated, and there was even a hint of hatred in it. Lin Jai frowned slightly as she turned to look at Qin Ting. Qin Ting replied calmly, "I'm sorry, but I really don't know where your boyfriend is. Please stop harassing me." Before the person on the other end of the phone could respond, he hung up the phone. After hanging up the call, Qin Ting turned to Lin Jai and said, "She's the girlfriend of a friend of mine. That friend of mine got her pregnant, and she disappeared after that. Ever since then, this woman has been pestering me, asking for all sorts of information on that friend of mine, but I really have no idea where that friend of mine has gone. Besides, I don't want to get involved in the affairs of a couple. Who knows, I might just end up getting myself into trouble." After listening to Qin Ting's description, Lin Jai replied with an "Oh." Just as she was about to add, "Your friend is also quite a scumbag." Qin Ting's phone rang again. It was from the same number. This time Qin Ting didn't pick up the call. Half a minute later, the call continued. A slight frown appeared on Lin Jai's forehead. "Why don't you answer the call and talk to her?" "It's not that I don't want to talk to her, but I really can't. I've explained to her countless times that I really don't know where her boyfriend went, but she just doesn't believe me. There's nothing I can do. Plus, she's pregnant. I'm really afraid that if I agitate her and something happens, I'll have to take responsibility." Lin Jai pondered for a moment, and she agreed that Qin Ting's words made sense, so she replied with a "That's true." A second later, Qin Ting's phone screen lit up. This time it was a message from the same number. "Qin Ting, you bastard, don't even think about it." Before Lin Jai could read the rest of the message, Qin Ting had already turned her phone screen black. "She's always like this, scolding me for no reason." Nodding her head, Lin Jai replied with an "okay" before turning her gaze to the window. If what Qin Ting said was true, the woman should be scolding her scumbag boyfriend. Why was she scolding Qin Ting? Also, don't even think about what happened after that. What made Qin Ting lock the screen in such a panic? Chapter 1063. She knew that she had to give the other party absolute trust, but she couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. Was there something wrong with her? Why did it feel like Qin Ting was hiding something from her? With this thought in mind, she glanced at Qin Ting through the rearview mirror. Qin Ting's gaze was focused on the road ahead as he drove, just like any other day. Due to Coco's illness, she didn't go to kindergarten the next day. However, Lung Yuan had an important meeting in the morning, so she left Coco in the care of the auntie and went to work. In the afternoon, she called the auntie and learned that Coco's fever had subsided. Lung Yuan was relieved. But at 3 in the afternoon, after Lung Yuan was done with her work, she bade farewell to her superior and returned home early. Coco was still a little listless after her fever subsided, but she was delighted to see Lung Yuan back. She quickly dragged Lung Yuan along to paint with her. At around 5 o'clock, Lung Yuan went to prepare some milk for Kiki. For the time being, Kiki, who was left alone, hugged a furry bunny and strolled around the house. When she reached the balcony, she suddenly pressed her face tightly against the glass and looked outside. Lung Yuan came out with a milk bottle and called out to Coco, but the latter ignored her. "Coco, what are you looking at?" Lung Yuan asked as she walked over to the balcony. Before she could get close, she saw Coco slapping on the window and shouting, "Daddy!" Lung Yuan frowned. She was just about to reprimand Coco when she suddenly thought of something. She hastened her footsteps to the balcony and looked down through the window. Just as she had guessed, it was Lu Benlai. He wasn't sitting in the car but leaning against it talking on the phone. "Daddy, Daddy!" Lu Benlai couldn't hear Coco's voice at all, but Coco still shouted at him. Lung Yuan retracted her gaze and squatted down to pass the milk bottle to Coco. "Coco, stop shouting. He won't be able to hear you. Be careful or your throat might hurt." Coco pushed the milk bottle away and pointed to the bottom of the window. Then she said to Lung Yuan, "Daddy, Daddy, Coco, you have to drink milk. If you continue like this, Mommy will get angry." As if she had been wronged, Coco pouted her lips and her eyes reddened. "I don't want milk, I want Daddy." Before Lung Yuan could say anything, tears rolled down from the corner of Coco's eyes. "I want Daddy, Daddy." Lung Yuan averted her gaze and stared at Lu Benlai for a moment before reaching out to wipe away the tears on Keek's face. "Drink the milk, and I'll let you go downstairs to play with Daddy, alright?" Coco immediately smiled and replied with a childish "alright," before taking the milk bottle. She stared at Lu Benlai through the window, fearing that he would leave at any moment, and without even catching her breath, she began gulping down the milk bottle in her mouth. It didn't take long for the milk to reach the bottom. Kiki looked at Lung Yuan expectantly before grabbing the latter's hand and pulling her toward the door. "Mommy, let's go downstairs. Let's go downstairs, Kiki. If you continue like this, you'll catch a cold. You'll have to go to the hospital to take medicine like last night. Mommy will get you some thick clothes." Now that she was seeing the father and daughter together with her own eyes, she realized that Keek's happiness was something that no one else could give her. Only when she was with Lu Benlai would she feel such happiness. It was a bond that blood was thicker than water. "Mom, what is Dad?" "Mom, the kids in kindergarten all said that they have a father. Why don't I have a father?" "Mom, Lin sure said that he gave his father to me. Can I have it?" "Mom, can I have a father for my birthday present this year?" Chapter 1065. She could clearly feel her heart wavering bit by bit. Not for anything else but for Kiki. To her, Kiki was her everything. As a mother, it was only natural that she wanted her daughter to possess the most perfect of everything. As usual, Lin Jai had a dinner to attend. Usually, she would take the elevator to the parking lot and leave the company. But today, before she left the company, she habitually opened the drawer beside her desk to place a heat pack on her lower abdomen, only to realize that it was all used up. The heat pack in the drawer was also prepared for her by the navigator. In the 7 years that he was around, she had never lacked these things. Staring at the empty drawer, Lin Jai suddenly felt a little hollow in her heart. "Boss Lin? Can we set off now? Boss Lin?" All of a sudden, there was a knock on the door, followed by her assistant's voice. Recovering from her daze, Lin Jai replied with an "oh" before closing the drawer. She grabbed her clothes and bag and walked out of the office. Perhaps it was because she had seen the navigator last night, but she had been thinking about him nonstop today. After entering the elevator, her assistant habitually pressed the button for the parking lot in the basement. But when they reached the 6th floor, Lin Jai suddenly said, "I'll be downstairs. Get the car and pick me up at the entrance. I'll head to the supermarket next door to buy some things." The assistant replied, "All right." Upon reaching the 1st floor, Lin Jai got out of the elevator first. Barely after taking 2 steps toward the entrance of the company, she realized that there was a huge commotion at the entrance. "If you continue like this, I'll call the police." From a distance away, she heard the voice of the receptionist. When she walked up to the receptionist, she asked, "What's wrong?" Many people immediately turned their heads to look at her. As most of them were employees of the Lin family enterprise, they recognized Lin Jai, so they quickly opened up a path for her. It was only then that Lin Jai realized that the person who was being held back by the security guard was a middle-aged man. Furious, the man charged into the Lin family enterprise while shouting, "I want to meet the higher-ups of the Lin family enterprise. How dare such a big company scam a small company like us?" Hearing the man's words, Lin Jai's frown deepened. "What's going on?" Noticing Lin Jai walking over, the receptionist hurriedly explained. As soon as he arrived, he immediately demanded to meet the chairman, claiming that our company had scammed him. I checked the records and I found that he didn't have an appointment with the chairman, so I didn't allow him to head upstairs. I told him that I could help him make an appointment with the chairman, but he immediately kicked up a huge fuss, claiming that I was intentionally obstructing him, saying that the Lin enterprise was going back on its word. In any case, his words were really nasty, so I had no choice but to invite security over to escort him out. "Your Lin's enterprise is a fraud. You bullied a small company like ours. Such a big company relied on scams to get to where it is today. I want to see your higher-ups. I don't care. I have a contract in my hand. You haven't done what you promised me." After hearing the front desk lady's words, the man suddenly jumped up in rage. Seeing him like this, the security guard subconsciously wanted to control him. Lin Jai hurriedly shot a glance at the security guard, signaling him not to act rashly. After which, she turned to the middle-aged man and asked with an understanding tone, "You said that you have a contract with you. Can you show it to me?" Given such an opportunity for a small company like mine, there's no way I'd be willing to let it slip by. Then, my friend told me that I had to give the family member some benefits. To be honest, I don't earn much money, and my company has just started not too long ago. But still, I gritted my teeth and gave the family member 500,000 yuan. After which, he signed the contract with me. See, it's been more than a month since then, and I saw on the news that the project had already begun, but we still haven't received the commencement notice yet. Family member? Since when did the Lin clan have such a family member? If it was 5 million yuan, she could still believe it. But 500,000 yuan? Surely the Lin clan wouldn't do something like that. Chapter 1067. We had a few meals together, and he said that he's the future son-in-law of the Lin family enterprise. He said that Lin Jai. "Oh, you're Lin Jai." "Yes, you're Lin Jai." He said that he's your boyfriend, and the two of you are already engaged, and you'll be getting married soon. He also said that as long as he asks for it, you'll definitely agree to it. He even showed me videos of him casually entering and exiting your office, your house, and the Lin family enterprise. Boyfriend. Ting. Lin Jai's expression stiffened slightly. "Do you know his name and phone number?" "Of course I do," the middle-aged man replied as he took out his phone. "Look, this is his phone number, right? Also, this is our call history. I've called him recently, but he hasn't picked up." Lin Jai stared at the familiar 11 digits silently. "Also, I took a photo with him when we were having a meal together. Let me show you." "Oh, I finally found it. Look, I didn't lie to you, did I?" The quality of the photo wasn't too good, but Lin Jai was still able to recognize that it was Qin Ting. "Boss Lin, can you tell me something? Is he your boyfriend? Were you the one who signed the contract with me back then?" Lin Jai shifted her gaze away from the middle-aged man's phone. "Yes, he's my boyfriend, but I didn't sign the contract with you." After saying those words, Lin Jai shot her assistant a look, and the assistant immediately brought over a folder and opened it before the middle-aged man. Sir, take a look. The contracts of our Lin conglomerate are all stamped with such a seal, and the seal you have is completely different from ours. It's clear that it's a fake. Also, this project isn't managed by our manager Lin but manager Lin's aunt. She doesn't have the authority to sign such a contract, so these are all proof. So I've been scammed? I've been scammed just like that? You're his girlfriend, aren't you going to do anything about it? The middle-aged man asked anxiously. Don't worry, I'll do something about it. However, the person who took your money will be the one to return it to you. Lin Jai quickly spoke up to console the middle-aged man. But what if he refuses to return it to me? What if he can't fork out the money? My employees are still waiting for me to pay them. You don't have to worry about that, Lin Jai said as she pulled open the drawer and took out the oversized diamond ring. Give me a few days. If he doesn't return your money by then, I'll give you this diamond ring so that you can sell it. Don't worry, this diamond ring is definitely worth 500,000 renminbi. If you want to sell it quickly, trust me, it won't be a problem to sell it for 1,000,000 RMB. As Lin Jai spoke, she glanced at her assistant and said, Give this gentleman his contact details. The assistant handed a business card to the middle-aged man. You can call me at any time to ask about the progress of this matter. Don't worry, Boss Lin said that he would help you manage it, so he will. The middle-aged man took the name card from Lin Jai's assistant and took a look at the number written on it, after which he picked up his phone and made a call. Seeing that the screen of Lin Jai's assistant's phone really lit up, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. All right then. Since that's the case, I'll trust you and wait for your news at home. Lin Jai replied with a smile, all right? Then she gestured for her assistant to escort the middle-aged man out. Lin Jai couldn't help but find the entire situation inconceivable. Her impression of Qin Ting was that of a noble and virtuous person. How could he possibly do something so despicable? While Lin Jai was still in a daze, the door to the office was pushed open. The assistant who had escorted the middle-aged man out had returned. Lin Jai raised her head to look at her assistant before saying, I want you to look into Qin Ting's recent situation in Beijing as soon as possible. Yes. Lin Jai was just about to get up and head to the dinner when she suddenly recalled the woman who had called Qin Ting earlier in the morning. So she said, right, there's also this phone number. Remember it and find a time to give her a call. Ask her what kind of relationship she has with Qin Ting. Chapter 1068. Right, remember this phone number. Find a time to give her a call and ask her what kind of relationship she has with Qin Ting. As the assistant listened to Lin Jai recite the numbers, she quickly took out her phone to record it down. Ms. Lin, I've memorized it. Is there anything else? Lin Jai shook her head. Then, as if suddenly recalling something, she instructed, right, don't tell anyone about the contents of my conversation with that gentleman in the office today. Also, I want you to carry out the tasks I've entrusted you with discreetly. Don't let anyone else know about it. I understand, Ms. Lin. After replying to Lin Jai's words, the assistant noticed that Lin Jai was leaning back in her chair silently, so she asked, Ms. Lin, if there's nothing else, we should hurry up and set off, or else we won't be able to make it for the dinner. As if she hadn't heard her assistant's words, Lin Jai simply stared at the empty space in front of her with a contemplative look. The assistant moved her lips once more, preparing to remind Lin Jai further, but before she could say a single word, Lin Jai suddenly raised her eyes and glanced at her. Let's go. After saying those words, Lin Jai stood up, and as if nothing had happened, she walked out of the office in her high heels. The weather grew colder and colder with each passing day. At the end of November, Beijing welcomed its first snow of the winter season. It was a Saturday, the day that the auntie had her day off. In the morning, when she checked the inventory in the house, she realized that most of the items were almost used up. In the afternoon, after Kiki woke up from her nap, Lung Wan brought Kiki out for a shopping spree. Just a casual stroll through the nearby supermarket took 2 to 3 hours. By the time Lung Wan and Kiki came out of the supermarket, it was already snowing heavily. Even though the supermarket wasn't too far away from home, Lung Wan still flagged down a taxi due to the heavy snowfall. It didn't take long for them to arrive at their home. After paying the fare, Lung Wan carried Cuckoo out of the car. Then she opened the trunk and took out 3 large bags. With Kiki in her arms, it was impossible for Lung Wan to carry the bags into the building. So after the taxi left, Lung Wan placed Kiki down and said, "Kiki, walk by yourself. Mommy will carry the bags, all right?" Coco nodded her head obediently. Following Lung Wan's movements, she slid out of Lung Wan's embrace and onto the ground. Lung Wan was carrying 2 shopping bags in one hand and one in the other. As they had bought quite a lot of daily necessities, they were a little heavy, so it was a little strenuous for her to carry them. When Kiki saw this, she quickly circled around Lung Wan before picking up a bag of diapers. "Mommy, let me help you. Kiki is such a good girl." Lung Wan praised Kiki before leading her into the building. However, before they could take 2 steps, a black car suddenly stopped in front of them. Before Lung Wan could react, Kiki had already tossed the diapers in her arms onto the ground and rushed to the car. "Daddy, Daddy." As soon as Coco said those words, the door to the driver's seat opened, and Lu Binlai stepped out. Lung Wan was about to ask Kiki to pick up the diaper on the floor, but when she saw Lu Binlai, her words suddenly froze in her mouth. Chapter 1069. Following which, Lu Binlai picked up the diapers that Kiki had left behind and walked over to Lung Wan. He glanced at the 3 shopping bags in her hands before reaching out to take 2 of them. "I'll send you upstairs." After saying that, he turned around and walked into the building with big strides. Lung Wan froze on the spot. It was only when Kiki, who was in Lu Binlai's arms, saw that she wasn't moving and called out "Mommy," that she snapped out of her daze and followed behind. There were only the 3 of them in the elevator. Kiki chatted with Lu Binlai, and Lu Binlai replied to her good-naturedly, but Lung Wan didn't say a word. When they reached their floor, Lu Binlai waited for Lung Wan to open the door, but he didn't enter. Instead, he placed the shopping bags by the door and placed Kiki down. "I'll be leaving first. I won't disturb you anymore." After saying those words to Lung Wan, Lu Binlai glanced at Kiki and stroked her head. "Goodbye, Kiki." After which, he stood up and prepared to leave. Lu Binlai had been busy with work for the past few days, and every time he came to Lung Wan's place, it would be late at night. Kiki didn't have the chance to come down to play with him. It wasn't easy for her to meet him, but seeing that he was about to leave, she immediately pounced forward and hugged Lu Binlai's leg tightly. With reddened eyes, she cried out, "Daddy, don't go." "Daddy, accompany Kiki." How about I play with you another day? Daddy has something on today." Lu Binlai's heart ached for Kiki, but he didn't want to make things difficult for Lung Wan, so he squatted down and coaxed Kiki. "No, I want Daddy to accompany Kiki today. Kiki misses Daddy." Seeing that Lu Binlai had rejected her, Kiki burst into tears. As she cried, she turned to look at Lung Wan pitifully. "Mommy, I want Daddy to accompany me. I want Daddy to accompany me. Kiki, listen to Daddy." Lu Binlai tried to persuade Kiki, but before he could finish his words, Lung Wan had already interjected, "Come in." After saying those words, Lung Wan picked up the 3 shopping bags on the floor and entered the kitchen without looking at Kiki. Lung Wan had been tidying up the kitchen the entire time. Even though she had closed the door, she could still hear Kiki's cheerful laughter. After she sorted out the things she bought and put them in the cabinet, she glanced at the time. It was almost time for dinner, so she didn't leave the kitchen. Instead, she started to prepare dinner. By the time she finished preparing dinner, it was already 6:30 p.m. After switching off the exhaust fan, Lung Wan realized that it was a little quiet outside. She pulled open the kitchen door, and before she could walk out, she saw an adult and a child sitting on the sofa in the living room. Kiki was watching a cartoon in Lu Binlai's embrace, and Lu Binlai had something urgent. It was actually a rather ordinary scene, but for some reason it moved Lung Wan's heart. She stared at the adult and child on the sofa, and unknowingly, her mind wandered off. After hanging up the call, Lu Binlai subconsciously glanced toward the kitchen, and when he saw Lung Wan standing at the entrance, he instinctively hugged Kiki and stood up. Lung. Lin his action Lung. Lin. Chapter 1070. Not too long later, Lung Wan walked out of the kitchen with a plate of food in her hands. She glanced at Lu Binlai, only to see that he was still standing by the sofa with Kiki in his arms. Thus she said, "Kiki, wash your hands. Come and eat." Hearing those words, Lu Benlai snapped out of his daze. By the time he turned his gaze back to Lung Nuan, she had already returned to the kitchen. He knew that even though Lung Nuan was calling Kiki, her words were directed at him. He really did not expect that she would let him into her house, let him stay for dinner, and even talk to him. Suppressing the agitation in his heart, Lu Benlai carried Kiki into the washroom. By the time he finished washing Kiki's hands and brought her out of the bathroom, Lung Nuan had already placed the dishes on the table. Lu Benlai first placed Kiki on the chair she was sitting on before taking a seat beside her. Lung Nuan didn't speak to him, but a bowl of soup was placed in front of him. Although he didn't drink the soup, looking at the ingredients made him think back to 4 years ago. When he returned home from work, he always saw the same soup on the dining table. "Daddy, hey?" Seeing that Lu Benlai wasn't moving at all, Zhang Xian reached out to grab the latter's collar. Recovering from his daze, Lu Benlai picked up Kiki's bowl and spoon and began feeding her. Since Lu Benlai was the one feeding her, Kiki wasn't like the auntie who fed her in the past, eating and playing at the same time. So it didn't take long for Kiki to be full. "Let Dad eat. Can you go play by yourself for a while?" Lung Nuan glanced at Lu Benlai's untouched chopsticks, then carried the clingy Kiki out of her chair and said, "Let Daddy eat. Daddy." Hearing those 2 words coming out of Lung Nuan's mouth, Lu Benlai's fingers subconsciously trembled. Coco nodded obediently. "Okay." Then he turned to look at Lu Benlai, and seeing that the latter hadn't eaten yet, he said, "Daddy, it's time to eat." Hearing Kiki's words, Lu Benlai recovered from his daze and replied with a "all right" before picking up his chopsticks. But as soon as Lu Benlai picked up his chopsticks, he ran off to watch a cartoon by himself. At the dining table, only Lung Nuan and Lu Benlai were left. Neither of them spoke to the other. The taste of the food was still the same. Even after so many years, nothing had changed. As Lu Benlai continued eating, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat, making it hard for him to swallow. If only he hadn't lost her, how good would that have been? With such thoughts in mind, he turned to look at Lung Nuan, who was seated beside him, and subconsciously moved his lips. "Nuan Nuan." He had only said those 2 words, but Lung Nuan seemed to know what he was going to say next. She raised her head to look at him and said, "The soup is already cold. I'll go heat it up for you." As she spoke, she stood up, took the bowl of soup in front of him and entered the kitchen. Lu Benlai knew that Lung Nuan had guessed what he was going to say, so she interrupted him. He didn't insist on talking to her anymore. After she heated the soup and came out, he pretended as if nothing had happened and silently ate his meal. On the other hand, Lung Nuan seemed to have been startled. She didn't return to the dining table. Instead, after placing down the bowl of soup, she went over to the sofa to accompany Kiki. Even though it was the weekend, Lin Jai still received a call in the afternoon asking for an urgent document, so she had her assistant rush it over. Chapter 1071. By the time the assistant changed into slippers and rushed into the study with the documents in hand, Lin Jai heard some movement and gestured for her to sit on the sofa by the side for a moment before continuing typing furiously on her laptop. Roughly 10 minutes later, Lin Jai was finally done with her work. She raised her head to look at her assistant and asked, "Have you brought the documents?" The assistant hurriedly stood up and passed the documents over to her. "Is this the one?" Lin Jai didn't say a word. She tore open the folder, took out the documents inside, and browsed through them briefly before nodding. "That's right, it's this one. Thank you for your hard work." "It's fine," the assistant replied before standing in Lin Jai's study, showing no signs of leaving. Usually, the assistant would take the initiative to leave after she was done with her work, but this time she didn't leave at all. Lin Jai couldn't help but raise her head to look at her curiously. "Is there anything wrong?" The assistant moved her lips, but she didn't say a word. After confirming that there was really something wrong, Lin Jai put down the documents in her hands and asked, "What's wrong? Speak." The assistant seemed to find it hard to speak. She moved her lips several times, but no words came out. Lin Jai chuckled. "You don't often act like this. If there's anything, just say it. It's fine." "It's not like that, Boss Lin." The assistant stuttered for a moment before finally gritting her teeth and saying, "It's the matter that you asked me to investigate, and I have some results." Lin Jai was taken aback. It took her a moment before she realized what she had asked her assistant to investigate. She nodded lightly and said, "All right, go ahead." The assistant fell silent once more. Lin Jai could guess what the assistant was thinking, so she said, "You don't have to be like that. Since I'm the one who asked you to investigate, I'm willing to listen to whatever the results are. Feel free to speak your mind." "All right, I'll speak then." After asking the question, Lin Jai shot him an encouraging look before speaking up. "Everything that the man who caused a ruckus in our company has said is true. Mr. Qin really used your name to scam him of 500,000 renminbi. Mr. Qin not only cheated this person, but he also cheated other companies. He cheated them all because he was your boyfriend and soon to be your fiancé. The accumulated money is almost 3 million yuan. One of the companies declared bankruptcy because he cheated them of 800,000 yuan. The boss asked Mr. Qin for money, but Mr. Qin found some gangsters to threaten him. In addition, when Mr. Qin talks to others about business and cooperation, he will mention your name. Many times when he meets with clients, the reason why he brings you with him is to make it easier for him to reach cooperation. It was President Chun who told me that he didn't want to cooperate with Mr. Qin, but Mr. Qin threatened him, saying that if he didn't cooperate with him, he would also stop the cooperation between Lin's enterprise and him. Mr. Qin often gambles and owes a lot of gambling debts. However, no one is chasing him because of you." At this point, the assistant paused to observe Lin Jai's expression. Seeing that she was still calm, she continued, "Other than that, I've already dialed the number that you asked me to. I didn't reveal our identity, but I've already gotten a rough idea of the situation on the other side. The owner of that number is Song Ying, a Shanghai native. She's the daughter of a small company, as well as Mr. Qin's wife." Chapter 1072. The caller's name is Song Ying. She's from Shanghai, and she's the daughter of a small company. She's also Mr. Qin's wife, Mr. Qin's wife. After saying those words, the assistant subconsciously assessed Lin Jai from head to toe. Her young and pretty face didn't reveal much emotion, but her fingertips, which were resting on the table, visibly trembled. Her boyfriend, who had proposed to her, had already married someone else. No one would be able to accept this, right? The assistant didn't know whether she should continue speaking or not. The study was silent for a moment before Lin Jai raised her head and glanced at her assistant. Her voice was calm and emotionless, and then, it was rare for the assistant to see Lin Jai in such a state, and she was so frightened that she didn't dare to speak anymore. Lin Jai frowned when she didn't hear anything else. Before Lin Jai could say anything, the assistant hurriedly said, "Mr. Qin has been married to Miss Song for 10 years. According to Miss Song, 11 years ago, when Mr. Qin was still studying in the United States, he met her on a blind date. After that, Mr. Qin pursued her. 1 year later, they got married. After their blind date, Mr. Qin never returned to the United States. In other words, he gave up on his studies in the United States. Miss Song said that Mr. Qin has always been good to her, and he took great care of her after their marriage. He would give her a small gift every 3 days and a big surprise every half a month. Miss Song also said that she was very satisfied and happy with her marriage. In the 3rd year of their marriage, Miss Song got pregnant. But unfortunately, due to her constitution, she suffered a natural miscarriage less than 3 months into the pregnancy. From then on, Miss Song's body became a little frail, and the doctor said that it would be difficult for her to conceive again. However, Mr. Qin didn't despise her because of this. This marriage lasted for 9 years, and in these 9 years they rarely quarreled. Miss Song's father was getting on in years, and seeing that Mr. Qin treated Miss Song well, he handed over the family business to Mr. Qin in the 7th year of their marriage. In the first 2 years, Mr. Qin treated Miss Song very well, but in the 9th year of their marriage, due to Mr. Qin's mistake, the company suffered heavy losses. Miss Song's father even gave Mr. Qin a huge pension, but it didn't solve the problem. From then on, Miss Song said that Mr. Qin spent less and less time at home, and he didn't treat her as well as before. Chapter 1073. Miss Song said that it has been almost 3 to 4 months since she last met Mr. Chin. When Miss Song called me to tell me about this, she was crying her heart out. She even asked me if I knew Mr. Chin and if I could find a way for her to meet him. At this point, the assistant couldn't help but speak up for Miss Song. I really think that Miss Song is quite pitiful. She told me that because of Mr. Chin, her hair was falling out in clumps, and her father was so angry that he was admitted to the hospital. Miss Song even said that most of the jewelry and watches that she bought at home were taken away and sold by Mr. Chin. Lin Jai remained silent, showing no intention of saying anything. Realizing that she had spoken too much, the assistant fell silent. A moment later, as if recalling something, she suddenly spoke up, "Right, there's one more thing. That, Boss Lin, Miss Song told me that Mr. Chin has never suffered from amnesia, and he has never been involved in any accidents. His name was on the list of those who were involved in the accident, but he wasn't in the car because he was already in China at the time." Miss Song also said that she knew that Mr. Chin had a girlfriend in America, but she didn't know much about it. Mr. Chin was the one who told her about the girlfriend, and he said that the girlfriend was just an ordinary girl from an ordinary family, so he didn't have any special feelings for her. It was just that they were both Chinese, so he felt a sense of closeness there. He said that the girlfriend was the one who took the initiative to court him, so she probably thought that he was no longer in this world. Mr. Chin also said that it's a good thing that he didn't leave any lingering memories for the girl, so she could think that he was dead and start a new life. The assistant wasn't aware of the history between Lin Jai and Qin Ting, so she habitually commented, "It seems like there's really something wrong with Mr. Chin. He even lied to his first ex-girlfriend." As soon as the assistant said those words, a document on the desk suddenly fell to the ground. The assistant immediately shut his mouth and turned to Lin Jai. At some point in time, Lin Jai had taken out an old silver ring from somewhere and was staring at it intently. She didn't realize that she had accidentally dropped a document onto the ground. The assistant walked up and bent down to pick up the document before placing it on the desk. "Boss Lin," before she could say anything, Lin Jai abruptly hid the ring away, as if she had been frightened by something. But very quickly Lin Jai didn't seem to be in a hurry anymore. She turned her head to look at her assistant and nodded calmly. "I understand. If there's nothing else, you should head back early." The assistant replied with an "oh" before standing in front of the desk and looking at Lin Jai worriedly. It took a while before Lin Jai realized that Luo Ruoxin was still around, and she shot a perplexed look at her. The assistant finally spoke. Lin, but before she could finish her words, Lin Jai had already guessed what she was going to say, and she interjected, "Don't worry, I'm fine." The assistant was speechless. She hesitated for a moment and said, "Then, Mr. Lin, I'll be leaving first. If you need anything, feel free to call me." Lin she. Chapter 1074. As the door to the study was closed, Lin Jai suddenly felt that the surroundings around her had fallen silent. The assistant had told her a lot of things, and she had actually heard them all in her mind and remembered them in her heart, but she just couldn't understand what the assistant's words meant. She had no idea how long she had been sitting at her desk, but she couldn't help but feel a little stuffy. She wanted to go out for some fresh air, but by the time she came back to her senses, she was already on the streets. She didn't wear a coat, and she didn't change out of her shoes either. All she had on her was her phone. The winter night was very cold outside, but at this moment she inexplicably liked this kind of howling, bone-chilling wind. It could make her more clear-headed, and it could also make her face the truth more rationally. She thought that she might have walked aimlessly on the streets for too long after leaving home, so her feet were starting to hurt. She didn't feel like walking anymore, so she found a random seat by the roadside and sat down. She thought about it seriously for a while and remembered that when she left the house, she had changed the password because Qin Ting knew it. Then when she was in the elevator, she had blocked Qin Ting's phone number. When she reached the first floor, she told the receptionist on duty to stop Qin Ting outside the building and not let him into the elevator if he ever came again. She wasn't wrong, this was her style. She wasn't a person who liked to drag things out, and indecisiveness wasn't in her nature either. Qin Ting was already in such a state, so if she didn't make a swift decision, would she be able to live through the new year? In truth, she didn't feel that bad when he used her name to scam people in Beijing. He was married for 10 years, and he had a wife named Song Ying. She didn't feel that bad either. When he reunited with her, he thought that she was a good person, so he wanted to hug her, so he abandoned his wife. She didn't feel that bad either. But when he told his wife about their time in the United States, he treated it as a story of the past. He even said that he had never lost his memory, and that his accident was just a play that he directed. Yet it still made her feel terrible. He didn't know her background, and yet he still wanted to soar to the top? Sure. He should have told her that she, Lin Jai, had never lacked a backbone. If he didn't love her, she would have let him go without any hesitation. Yet he actually faked his death to escape from her, leaving her with a love that she thought to be a beautiful one that she guarded with all her heart for 11 years. 11 years from the age of 19 to 30, a woman's best years in youth, had been spent on him, and the result? In the end, the outcome was that her sincerity had been fed to the dogs. As for the question of whether it was worth it or not, she really didn't want to pursue it. Since things had already come to this, she had chosen the path, and she had no complaints. The only thing that she couldn't accept was that the beautiful dream she had when she was young was really just a dream. Some people, what they feared the most was a sudden death, because once they died, the only thing they would remember was the good. Perhaps Qin Ting really wasn't that good after all. It was his death and her sudden loss that made her endlessly beautify him in her mind. Eventually, he became the white moonlight in her heart, the white moonlight that no one could surpass. Did she love him? Did she really love him? Chapter 1075. Even though she knew that it wasn't worth it for her to feel sad for Qin Ting, she still couldn't help but feel sad. How could she not feel sad? The person she cared about the most for so many years, the thing she cared about the most, had all turned into a joke in the end. Just the thought of it was too much for her to accept. Lin Jai raised her head to look at the sky. As much as she felt sad, as much as she couldn't accept it, she couldn't allow herself to shed a single tear for him. As the word tears crossed her mind, she remembered the tears she had shed for him every year on the anniversary of his death. All those years she had thought he was dead. Bloody hell! If not for the fact that murder was against the law, she would have really wished for that day to be the anniversary of his death. Only then would she be worthy of those tears she had shed for him. But it didn't matter. Tonight, she would feel sad if she had to, and after tonight, she would find a way to make him return all the tears she had shed for him. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jai stood up and took a deep breath before continuing down the street. When she finally arrived at a bar that she was familiar with, Lin Jai stepped in. The owner of the bar recognized Lin Jai, and before Lin Jai could even order, he had already served the best wine in his bar to Lin Jai. Lin Jai took the wine bottle and poured herself a cup of wine. Facing the empty space in front of her, she said, "This cup of wine is to the 18 of us." After saying those words, Lin Jai gulped down the entire cup of wine. Putting down the cup heavily, Lin Jai poured herself another cup of wine and raised her cup to the empty space in front of her once more. "This cup of wine is to the broken hearts, the tears, and the drunken wine I've drunk for you all those years ago." Lin Jai still gulped down the entire cup of wine without missing a single drop. "The third cup. This cup of wine is to the white moonlight that I loved so deeply all those years ago. The fourth cup. This cup of wine is to the heavens for our reunion once more. If not for this reunion, I'm afraid that I would still be foolishly, stubbornly holding on to that joke for a long time. The fifth cup, the sixth cup, the seventh cup." By the time she reached the 15th cup, Lin Jai's words were already slurring. In fact, she couldn't even remember how many times she had counted. "This cup of wine is to a scumbag like you. Hurry up and die. Happy 10th anniversary with this glass of wine? Haha. How do you think this kind of person can get a wife? The person who married him, was she a fool? Oh, I'm also a fool. Alright. This cup of wine, a toast to me, a fool." "Indeed. Lin Jai, you're a fool." "No, I mean Xia Shangzhou is a fool." That's not right either. What does this have to do with the GPS? "But you're right, the GPS is pretty stupid." Lin Jai muttered under her breath as she poured another cup of wine. "Ha, if I were to toast the navigator with this cup of wine, I'd be a fool, and a big fool at that. This cup of wine is for the moonlight, for the morning sun, for freedom, for love. This last cup of wine to tomorrow. Tomorrow will be even better. Yes, that's right. Tomorrow will be better. As Lin Jai said those words, she slumped onto the table, completely motionless. Miss Lin? Miss Lin? The owner of the bar walked up to her and called her name a few times. Seeing that she didn't respond, he thought about Xia Shangzhou, who used to accompany her here often. He pulled out his phone and called Xia Shangzhou. Chapter 1076. After resigning from the Lin family, Xia Shangzhou had visited the bar a few times. So, as soon as the owner of the bar reported his attendance, Xia Shangzhou immediately responded, I know. May I know what's the matter? It's like this, Mr. Xia. Your boss is drunk right now. Is it convenient for you now? Can you come over and pick her up? Boss. Xia Shangzhou subconsciously asked. But before the owner of the bar could reply, he suddenly realized something and asked Boss Lin. Yes, it's Miss Lin. There are more and more customers here, so it's a little inconvenient for me to take care of her. Besides, she's alone, and I'm afraid that something might go wrong, so, before the owner of the bar could finish his words, Xia Shangzhou had already interjected, I understand. Help me take care of her for half. No, 15 minutes will do. I'll be there right away. No problem. 15 minutes is fine. Besides, Miss Lin can be considered as half a friend of mine. Thank you. I'll see you later then. See you later. As soon as the owner of the bar said those words, Xia Shangzhou hung up the call. The owner of the bar leaned over to Lin Jai and called her a few times, hoping to wake her up and have her rest in the lounge at the back. However, there was no response from her at all. So he called for a waiter to help keep an eye on Lin Jai before heading back to the bar counter to continue mixing drinks. In truth, it had only been 10 minutes since the door of the bar was pushed open, and the travel-worn Xia Shangzhou barged in. Mr. Xia. Hearing the commotion, the owner of the bar raised his head to look at the door and instinctively greeted him. But before he could finish his words, Xia Shangzhou had already rushed up to him and asked, Where is she? Before the owner of the bar could point her out to Xia Shangzhou had already scanned the surroundings before his eyes finally fell on Lin Jai, who was seated by the window. I'll go take a look at her first, Xia Shangzhou said as he began walking toward Lin Jai. Boss Lin? Boss Lin? Xia Shangzhou called out to Lin Jai several times, but there was no response from her at all. Damn, he was really drunk to the point of unconsciousness. With such thoughts in mind, Xia Shangzhou glanced at the table and saw that it was filled with empty bottles. A deep frown appeared on his forehead. Did she drink all of this? Why did she drink so much? Even before she met Qin Ting, she had never drunk herself to this extent on the anniversary of Qin Ting's death. Boss Lin? Boss Lin? He tried calling out to Lin Jai a few more times, but she was still slumped over the table, not moving at all. Thus he turned around and walked back to the bar counter. He turned to the owner of the bar and asked, How much is it? I'll give you the bill first. The bar owner handed Xia Shangzhou a bill. Xia Shangzhou took out his wallet and looked at the amount. Suddenly, he froze in the middle of taking out his card. In just a few seconds he stuffed his wallet back into his pocket. Can I use WeChat? Sure. Hearing the owner's reply, Xia Shangzhou sent a message to Lu Benlai. It didn't take long for Lu Benlai to send him a message. It was a transaction record, and after receiving it, Xia Shangzhou passed his phone over to the owner of the bar to settle the bill. Chapter 1077. By the roadside, Xia Shangzhou flagged down a taxi and carried Lin Jai into the car. After reporting Lin Jai's home address to the driver, he realized that Lin Jai had run out of her house in her home clothes. She was only wearing slippers and she didn't even have a thick coat on. Lin Jai had always been a beauty freak. Even if it was just a simple trip to the supermarket to buy something, she would still choose a beautiful outfit before she would leave the house. What was wrong with her today? Even though Lin Jai was so drunk that Xia Shangzhou had no idea what was going on, he couldn't help but worry for her. She must have met with something really upsetting, right? It shouldn't be something related to work. After all, if it was something related to work, it had to be something really troublesome for her. His former colleagues would surely tell him about it, and for her, it shouldn't be something related to her personal life either. So, the only thing left was her relationship with Qin Ting. Did something happen between her and Qin Ting? Indeed, only Qin Ting would make her sad, heartbroken, and drunk with such thoughts in mind. Xia Shangzhou couldn't help but feel a little sour in his heart. Soon they arrived at Lin Jai's apartment. After alighting from the taxi with Lin Jai in his arms, Xia Shangzhou quickly rushed into the elevator and headed upstairs. When they arrived at Lin Jai's house, Xia Shangzhou placed Lin Jai on the ground and entered the passcode with one hand. Her passcode was her birthday. He had memorized it by heart, but no matter how many times he tried, he couldn't get the passcode correct. Did Lin Jai change her passcode? Xia Shangzhou tried again, but the passcode was still incorrect. Left with no choice, he tried waking Lin Jai up, but Lin Jai was leaning unsteadily on his shoulder, not knowing who he was or what he was talking about. Eventually, Xia Shangzhou tried searching for Lin Jai's house key, only to realize that she didn't even bring her bag out. It seemed like he wouldn't be able to enter her house, but he couldn't send her to the Lin family mansion either. If the people there saw her drunk like this, they would surely reprimand her the next day. She couldn't go to the hotel either. She didn't even have her identity card with her, so she couldn't stay there even if she wanted to. After a moment of contemplation, Xia Shangzhou could only carry Lin Jai back down the stairs, hail a cab, and bring her back to his home. His home was no longer the house he used to rent, but the small apartment he bought with a loan 2 years ago. It was renovated at the beginning of the year and had been there for half a year. He just moved in last month. Upon arriving at the entrance of his house, Xia Shangzhou took out his keys and opened the door. After which, he carried Lin Jai in and placed her on the sofa before walking to the door and closing it. After which, he opened the shoe cabinet and rummaged through it for a long time before he finally found a pair of slippers that he hadn't worn before. Walking over to her, he bent down and helped her change her slippers. When he changed her shoes, his fingertips touched the tips of her feet, and he found that it was bone-chilling. He picked up her slippers and squatted in front of her for a while. Then he got up and went to the bathroom. Not long after, he walked over to her with a basin of steaming hot water. He knelt down again and carefully placed her feet in the basin. Chapter 1078. As he tucked her in, he heard her furrow her brows and mutter about water. He hurriedly walked to the open kitchen and made a pot of hot water. He added some mineral water to the most suitable temperature, then brought it to the bedroom and carefully fed it to her. After she finished the water, Xia Shangzhou gently laid her body flat on the bed. Just as he was about to get up and leave with the glass of water, she suddenly flipped over on the bed, reached out her arms and wrapped them around his waist. Xia Shangzhou was so shocked that his fingers trembled, and he almost knocked the glass of water to the floor. He was stunned for a while before he forced himself to calm down. Then he slowly turned his head to look at her on the bed. After drinking the water, she seemed to feel a lot more comfortable. She closed her eyes and fell into a deeper sleep. She had the habit of hugging a pillow when she slept, so he thought she probably thought of him as the fox on her bed at home. However, it wasn't the same thing for her to hug him like that. He grabbed a pillow from the side and wanted to switch places, but when he moved slightly, her brows furrowed. He was so frightened that he didn't dare move. However, it was a little uncomfortable for him to twist his body like that while she was hugging him, so he adjusted his movements to find a more comfortable position to lean against the headboard. He was comfortable, but she probably didn't feel comfortable hugging him. Her arms around his waist moved again and again, and then her head, which was lying on the pillow, suddenly leaned against his chest. Then, as though she felt comfortable in this position, her entire body became completely docile and quiet. It was very quiet in the room. The unique fragrance of her body mixed with the smell of alcohol endlessly burrowed into his nostrils. Her hair smelled the best. He didn't know what brand of shampoo she used, but it emitted a faint, almost indiscernible fragrance. Xia Shangzhou's breathing gradually became a little unsteady. He didn't dare look at her again, so he turned his head and looked at the night view outside the window. As the night slowly deepened, she fell into a deeper sleep. In the quiet space he could clearly feel her heartbeat and her breathing. Such a scene was so illusory yet so real. He lay in the same position for a long time, but he didn't dare move. He was afraid that if he moved, it would be like the countless dreams he had in the past, and everything would be gone. Time passed very slowly, but he especially liked this slowness. He leaned against the headboard, alternating between sleeping and waking. His heart raced and his lips broke into a smile. It wasn't until the sky turned white in the east that he slowly loosened his grip on her waist. Her head rolled off his chest and onto the pillow beside him. Losing the weight on his chest made him dazed for a moment. Then he turned his head and looked at her. She didn't show any signs of waking up, but he didn't stay there any longer. He tiptoed up, grabbed a glass of water and left the bedroom. He lay down on the sofa and closed his eyes to catch up on sleep. After lying down for a while, he suddenly placed his hand on his chest, where she had been sleeping the whole night. At 8 o'clock, Xia Shangzhou was woken up by his alarm. He pushed open the bedroom door and took a look inside, only to see Lin Jai sleeping soundly on the bed. Not waking her up, he headed straight to the bathroom to take a shower before changing into a set of clean clothes. After which, he headed out to buy breakfast. Chapter 1079. By the time he returned, he had just pushed open the door when he heard some commotion coming from the master bedroom. He quickly grabbed his slippers and prepared to head over to take a look, but before he could change into his slippers, a scream of shock sounded from the master bedroom, followed by a vulgar curse. Following which, the door to the master bedroom was abruptly flung open, and a barefooted Lin Jai dashed out from within. Upon seeing Xia Shangzhou standing at the door, Lin Jai's bristling hair immediately calmed down. "Ah, you were the one who brought me back last night?" Xia Shangzhou replied with an before staring at Lin Jai's bare feet. "Boss Lin, my floor is very dirty." Lin Jai snorted coldly before returning to the master bedroom. She put on her slippers and walked out again. "Navigator, these slippers are yours, right? They're so big. But I do like the color. My head hurts. Do you have water to drink? Forget it, do you have any clothes? Lend me a set. I want to take a bath first. The stench of alcohol is really suffocating me." Following Lin Jai's words, a large bag was passed over to her. "Xia Shangzhou, when I went to buy breakfast earlier, I bought it from a random supermarket by the roadside. The supermarkets are only open for 24 hours at the moment, so the goods aren't that good. You should make do with this first. I'll send you home later so that you can take another bath." Lin Jai didn't respond to Xia Shangzhou's words. Instead, she opened the bag and saw that it was filled with toiletries and pajamas. After which, she waved at Xia Shangzhou and walked into the bathroom. After Lin Jai came out of the bathroom, Xia Shangzhou called her over for breakfast. Lin Jai seemed to be in a good mood as she walked over. Looking at the breakfast that Xia Shangzhou had placed on the table, she grabbed a dumpling with her hand and stuffed it into her mouth. As she ate, she mumbled an After swallowing the dumpling, she remarked, "It's so delicious." Looking at Lin Jai's delighted expression, Xia Shangzhou's expression turned even more grim. She was clearly acting the same way last night, but she woke up in such a state. Was she putting on an act? Lin Jai didn't stand on ceremony. She pulled out a chair and sat down, then began eating her breakfast. As she ate, she noticed that Xia Shangzhou was staring at her in a daze, so she pointed to the chair and said, "What are you standing there for? Let's have breakfast." Xia Shangzhou sat down and picked up his chopsticks. After taking 2 bites, he turned to Lin Jai and said, "Boss Lin." Lin Jai looked around Xia Shangzhou's house and remarked, "You moved in? Why didn't you tell me? This house is a little small, but it's still quite cozy." The words that Xia Shangzhou was about to say were swallowed back by Lin Jai. "That lamp is from the shop I recommended to you. Did their boss give you a discount?" Oh, I like that desk too. Alright, Navigator, your house is just like that one. Although it's small, it has all the essentials, Boss Lin." Xia Shangzhou finally spoke up, interrupting Lin Jai's evaluation of his house. Lin Jai quickly shut her mouth. But before Xia Shangzhou could ask any further, Lin Jai had already guessed what he was going to say and replied, "I'm fine. Also, Qin Ting and I. To be more precise, I made a unilateral decision. We broke up. But my unilateral decision is the end. In other words, I broke up with Qin Ting and will have nothing to do with her in the future. Chapter 1080. Break up. Xia Shangzhou asked in bewilderment, as if he had just heard the most unbelievable word in the world. That's right. Lin Jai replied firmly. A moment later, she spoke up once more. And it was hard to tell whether she was speaking to Xia Shangzhou or herself. We broke up. Broke up. She said that she broke up with Qin Ting. He had already guessed last night that something might have happened between her and Qin Ting, but he didn't think that it would be so serious to the extent that they would break up. He had seen how much she liked him over the years, so for her to make such a decision, Qin Ting must have done something really overboard, right? Putting Qin Ting aside, she must be feeling awful at the moment, right? But that was to be expected. If she wasn't feeling awful, why would she put herself in such a pathetic state last night? To Xia Shangzhou, this was clearly a piece of good news, but he couldn't bring himself to feel the slightest bit of joy. Instead, he felt even more worried. He stared at Lin Jai for a moment before moving his lips once more, Lin. But before he could finish his words, Lin Jai had already interjected with a smile. All right, the best time of the day is morning. I don't want to talk about unhappy matters and unworthy people so early in the morning, so, Navigator, let's have breakfast and talk about something happy, all right? Just as Xia Shangzhou was about to ask Lin Jai what had happened, his words got stuck in his throat, and he found himself unable to speak anymore. He stared at her for a moment, but he couldn't tell if she had really let it go, or if she was trying her best to let it go, or if she was simply too deeply hurt to touch it. His worry deepened, but when he spoke up once more, he changed the topic. Sure, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about my house or the breakfast before you? Either is fine. Lin Jai took a sip of her porridge before raising her head to look at the ceiling. The lamp on the dining table is not bad. I bought it online. Those flowers on the balcony, are they all yours? That's right. Not bad. I didn't think that you would be an expert in gardening, Navigator. Before they knew it, the two of them had finished their breakfast. It was about time for Xia Shangzhou to go to work, but he wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stared at Lin Jai intently and asked, how do you intend to spend the day? If she guessed correctly, Qin Ting would definitely go to the company or home to look for her if she couldn't get in touch with her. Therefore, she didn't really want to go to work, nor did she really want to go home. She didn't want to go back to the old mansion to listen to her family urging her to get married. Lin Jai pondered for a moment before asking, can I stay here with you? Yes, of course. As Xia Shangzhou spoke, he pointed at his house. My house isn't big and I only have this much stuff. So feel free to do whatever you want. Just treat this as your own home. Thank you, Navigator. Lin Jai shot Xia Shangzhou a radiant smile. Xia Shangzhou blinked and looked at the nearby desk. Do you know how to use a computer? Forget it. I'll write down the password for you. If you want to use it, just use it yourself. The remote control for the TV is also on the desk in the box next to the mouse. Chapter 1081. I might not be able to make it back for lunch, so you can order takeout. I've written down the address for you as well. If you find it troublesome, you can give me a call and tell me what you want to eat. I'll order it for you. He added another line of words beneath the number. After putting down his pen, he was intending to head to work, but as soon as he walked over to the sofa, before he could even tidy up his documents, he suddenly remembered that other than her phone, she didn't have anything else with her. So he turned to Lin Jai and asked, is there anything you need? There's no hurry, you can take your time to think about it. Send it to my WeChat, and I'll buy it for you when I get back from work tonight. Also, recalling that Lin Jai didn't have her wallet with her, the navigator realized that she probably didn't have much change on her. While it was convenient to use her phone to pay for things outside, it was still safer to have some money on hand. Thus he took out his wallet and took out a few red notes. He walked over to the dining table and placed them before Lin Jai. Take this money. If you're bored at home, you might need it when you head out. After saying all that he needed to say, Xia Shangzhou confirmed that there was nothing else he wanted to say, so he said, I'll be heading to work first. If you're feeling sleepy, you should catch up on your sleep. While Zhang Xian was chattering away, Lin Jai had been staring at him silently the entire time. However, upon hearing those words, she looked at him with a smile on her face and nodded her head lightly. Xia Shangzhou was still worried, and he was just about to nag a little more when he saw Lin Jai's gentle expression, and those words died in his throat. Looking at her smiling face, he fell silent for a moment before finally saying, "I'll be leaving now." Then he turned around and left the house. It was a long time after the door closed that Lin Jai finally came back to her senses. She slowly lowered her gaze and looked at the few notes he had left on the table. Ever since she was young, other than her grandfather, her father and the ATM, there had never been a man who gave her money to spend. The navigator was the first. But then again, the navigator was really too stingy to only give her 500 renminbi. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jai picked up the 500 renminbi note and waved it in front of her face before stuffing it into the pocket of her pajamas. This seemed to be the first man's money she had ever asked for, aside from her grandfather, father and ATM machines. It just so happened that Lin Jai was wrapping up all of her work recently, so it didn't really matter if she wasn't in the company. She called her assistant and told her that she wouldn't be going to the company for the next few days. She also told her assistant not to tell anyone about her whereabouts. She also told her to contact her if there was anything. After hanging up, she completely forgot about work in Qingting. She stayed in Xia Shangzhou's house playing games, watching TV, scrolling through Weibo, and watching live broadcasts. Unknowingly, the entire morning had passed. When she picked up the phone that had run out of battery and was charging on Xia Shangzhou's desk, she saw that Xia Shangzhou had sent her a WeChat message. In the hour that she was not looking at her phone, Xia Shangzhou had sent her several messages. "What are you doing? Why aren't you talking? It's almost noon. What do you want to eat?" Chapter 1082. Even though Xia Shangzhou didn't ask about what had happened between her and Qin Ting, nor did he console her, Lin Jai knew that the reason why Xia Shangzhou would send her a message every once in a while was because he was worried about her. Was she really getting old? Was she getting old? She suddenly realized that the navigator's actions were far more romantic than the way Qin Ting chased after her in the United States. It was just like that morning when she told him that she wanted to stay at his place, and before he left, he had told her those bits and pieces. Back then, when she looked at his silhouette and listened to his voice, she couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and comfort. While Lin Jai was in a daze, her phone suddenly rang. She snapped out of her daze and glanced at the screen. It was a call from Xia Shangzhou. She picked up the call, but before she could say a word, she heard his anxious voice through the phone. "Boss Lin, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Lin Jai couldn't help but think that she was acting like a coquettish little girl. To think that she would actually feel like crying upon hearing the navigator's words. This really wasn't in line with her persona. "Oh, I saw that you weren't replying to my message, so I thought that you..." Before Xia Shangzhou could finish his words, Lin Jai had already interjected. "I was watching a live stream when my phone ran out of battery, so I placed it by the side to charge it up. After that, I went to watch a movie, so I didn't pay much attention to my phone. I was just about to pick up my phone to reply to your message when you suddenly called me." Oh. Xia Shangzhou nodded a few times before his tone visibly relaxed. "Have you had lunch yet? Do you want me to go back?" "There's no need for that. I'm not hungry at the moment. I'll order something to eat when I'm hungry. You should get back to work." "All right then. Give me a call if you need anything." "Got it." Lin Jai stayed at Xia Shangzhou's place for an entire week. In this week, she didn't go to the office and she didn't return home either. In the past week, she had received 20 calls from her assistant. Half of the calls were about Qin Ting looking for her again. Her assistant had also suggested to her that she should lay her cards on the table with Qin Ting as soon as possible, but without even thinking about it, she rejected her assistant's suggestion. Back then, Qin Ting had lied to her for 10 years, and it had only been a few days since then, and yet, he was already thinking of freeing Qin Ting. She, Lin Jai, wasn't an easygoing person. She didn't want Qin Ting to know that she knew all of his trump cards, so she intentionally left him hanging so that he would think that there was still hope for her. Over the past week, Lin Jai had even gone to the market to buy some groceries. They were all her favorites, and of course Xia Shangzhou had prepared them for her after he got off work. Over the past week, Lin Jai had been trying to clean up Xia Shangzhou's home, but in the end, she accidentally broke one of his ornaments. Over the past week, Lin Jai had also tried to wash Xia Shangzhou's clothes, but in the end, she failed to separate his underwear, shirt, and pants. Over the past week, on a whim, Lin Jai had even made a dinner for him. She had followed the steps on the internet to make it, and while it looked passable, the taste was rather average. She didn't eat a single bite, but Xia Shangzhou seemed to be enjoying it very much. Chapter 1083. She couldn't help but think that emotions were truly a mysterious thing. It wasn't too long ago that she was deeply in love with him, but in the blink of an eye, all of that love had vanished without a trace. It was a brand new week. On Monday afternoon, while Lin Jai was on her lunch break, she was woken up by a call from her assistant. She was a little displeased that her dreams had been disrupted, so she picked up the call and heard that it was news regarding Qin Ting once more. She felt even more vexed. "Boss Lin, Mr. Qin has come to the company to look for you again. This time he's different from before. He's causing a huge commotion." Her assistant called her over a video call, and as soon as she finished speaking, the image on the screen changed from her assistant's face to that of the lobby of the first floor of the Lin family enterprise. All she could see were roses and pink balloons. It was a very romantic scene. Dressed in a suit, Qin Ting stood amidst the sea of flowers shouting, "Lin Jai, I love you." If one didn't know about the things he had done behind the scenes, just from his appearance alone, one would think that he was infatuated. "Look, Boss Lin, what should we do now? Many people in the company have come downstairs to take a look. It won't be good for him to continue causing a ruckus like this, right?" Ignoring her assistant's words, Lin Jai continued staring at Qin Ting on the screen, and for some reason, she couldn't help but think of the navigator. She used to think that Qin Ting was really dashing and charming, but now, why did she feel that the navigator frying an egg in the kitchen with an apron wrapped around his waist was even more pleasing to the eye and more manly? "Lin Jai, I don't know why you've suddenly ignored me. I think that I might have done something wrong, so I'll apologize to you right here. I hope that you can give me a chance so that I can become better. Lin Jai, I know that you'll be able to see this scene, so I'm here today to express my determination to you. I'll be standing right here waiting for you to appear." She was clearly the female lead in the video, but Lin Jai seemed to be enjoying it as if she was watching a drama. "Boss Lin? Boss Lin?" Her assistant's voice interrupted Lin Jai's excitement. "Ignore him. Let him shout if he wants to." As she spoke, Lin Jai yawned and said, "I'm really tired, so I'm going back to sleep. If it's because he's causing trouble in the company again, you don't have to call me anymore. If I have the time, I might as well watch more Korean dramas. The scenes where the male leads confess to each other are much more romantic than this." Without waiting for her assistant to respond, Lin Jai hung up the call and went back to sleep. When she woke up again, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. When she picked up her phone, she saw that her assistant had sent her a WeChat message. It was a few photos. Qin Ting had changed from standing and shouting to kneeling with a serious face. There were several text messages below that could help with haircutting. "Boss Lin, what should we do? Mr. Qin said that if you don't show up, he will keep kneeling. He'll kneel until you show up." Lin Jai replied to her assistant's message nonchalantly as she headed to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. "If he wants to kneel, let him kneel. However, I want you to have the security escort him out and make him kneel on the streets. If he causes a ruckus, call the police. And don't tell him that it's me. Just tell him that it's an ATM machine." "Oh, the ATM machine is Lin Jiej." After replying to the message, Lin Jai picked up the glass of water and sat in front of the study table. She switched on her laptop, and while waiting for it to boot up, she felt bored. So she reached out and pulled on the drawer of Xia Shangzhou's study table, and she saw something exceptionally familiar in one of the drawers. Chapter 1084. After replying to the message, Lin Jai picked up a cup of water and sat in front of the study table. She switched on her laptop and out of boredom, she reached out to pull on the drawer of Xia Shangzhou's study table. Then she saw something exceptionally familiar in one of the drawers. It was a hair clip. Frowning, she picked up the hair clip and raised it to her eyes to examine it carefully. The hair clip was a little old, and it was a pearl style that was popular a few years ago. She remembered that a few years ago, before this hair clip became popular, she had bought a pair of these from a designer she was familiar with. After a long period of time, there were quite a few female celebrities who wore this style of hair clip while posing at the airport, and they became popular for a very long time. However, when this hair clip became popular, she lost one of them, so the other one became useless. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jai muttered in bewilderment. She brought the hairpin closer to examine the pearl on it, and it was only when she noticed that there was indeed a very, very small flaw on it that she realized that it was her hairpin. It was no wonder why she found it familiar. If she recalled correctly, it was the third year that the navigator had been by her side when this hair clip became popular. There were many things that she didn't want that she would casually throw into the trash can or pass to the navigator to get rid of them for her. So, in truth, the navigator didn't lose this hair clip but kept it for herself? With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jai lowered her head to look at the drawer and saw a paper bag inside. She hesitated for a moment before opening it, and just as she had guessed, the miscellaneous items inside were all hers. The fountain pen that she didn't use, her hair tie, the necklace that she despised, the bolster that she suddenly didn't like, the cup that she had discarded because of her love for the new. Lin Jai didn't even flip through a single one of them before she felt something pressing against her heart, causing a shudder that she couldn't tell whether it was pain or soreness. The navigator must be sincere toward me, right? He must be, right? He must really, really like me, right? That's why he would keep all of the things that she didn't want, treating them as treasures. There were many people who liked her, but there was only one person who loved her so passionately, reluctantly, persistently, and secretly. There were many things that happened once, and if there was a second time, there would be a third time. For example, at the very start, when Lu Benlai pursued Lung Nuan only wanted to reject him. But eventually, she couldn't bring herself to do so, so she spoke to Lu Benlai for the first time. And after that, there was a second and a third later on. When Lung Nuan clearly didn't want to give Lu Benlai a chance, she still relented and said that she would give him a chance if it snowed on Christmas. She would become his girlfriend, and she fell deeply in love with him. Chapter 1085. Kiki pleaded with her for the entire night, and her heart softened. That night, when she learned that the person behind the phone number was Lu Benlai, she gave Lu Benlai a call for the first time, and asked him if he was free to participate in the parent-child activities organized by Kiki's kindergarten. Without any hesitation, Lu Benlai agreed to it. When she told Lu Benlai the date and time, Lu Benlai replied in English. Lung Nuan was a graduate of G University's English faculty. To her, those words couldn't be any easier to understand. That was something that only people like waiters would say. There were very few waiters in China who knew how to speak English, so Lu Benlai was. With such thoughts in mind, Lung Nuan asked, "Aren't in the country?" Lu Benlai, He's on a business trip in America. Back in the United States. There were only 18 hours left until Coco's kindergarten event. He could make it back in time, but wasn't that too much of a rush? After all, flying alone would take 12 hours. Lung Nuan subconsciously spoke up once more. Why don't we just forget about it? We'll talk about it next time. I'll have a good talk with Kiki. Oh, there's no need for that. It's fine, I'll be able to rush back. A second after Lu Benlai said those words, the attendant beside him spoke up once more. Before the attendant could finish his words, Lu Benlai had already stopped him. However, through the few words that Lung Nuan heard, she could roughly tell that Lu Benlai had just arrived in the United States and had just checked in at the hotel. She was just about to speak up to tell Lu Benlai that there was really no need to go through so much trouble, but before she could say anything, Lu Benlai had already said, "I'll talk to you later. I'll be hanging up first." After which he hung up the phone. The next day, at 2:00 in the afternoon, it was time for Kiki's kindergarten's parent-child activities. Lung Nuan worked in the company in the morning, and at noon she applied for a day off from her leader. After which, she returned home and changed into casual clothes, preparing to head to kindergarten. She thought that even if Lu Benlai had rushed back, he would have headed straight to kindergarten. Never did she expect to see Lu Benlei's car parked at his favorite spot after she changed her clothes and headed downstairs. Perhaps the people in the car saw her coming out of the building and rolled down the window. Seated in the back seat, Lu Benlei's face appeared before her eyes. She didn't tell him to wear casual clothes in advance, but he had already changed into casual clothes. He looked fine except for the dark circles under his eyes. Get in the car? I'll bring you there. Hearing Lu Benlei's words, the chauffeur immediately got out of the car and ran over to Lung Nuan's side to open the car door for her. Lung Nuan stared at Lu Benlei, who was seated inside, without moving. Lu Benlei pondered for a moment, and thinking that Lung Nuan was unwilling to sit next to him, he spoke up once more. You take a seat, I'll go to the front. As he spoke, he prepared to get out of the car. But before he could get down, Lung Nuan lowered her head and dived into the car. After closing the car door, the chauffeur asked Lu Benlei for the address of the kindergarten before skillfully driving the car to its destination. Lu Benlei and Lung Nuan sat side by side in the backseat of the car. Throughout the entire journey they didn't speak much to one another. The theme of this parent-child activity was to make cookies. Chapter 1086. Of course, the children definitely couldn't make any cookies. They all used the dough as a toy, so things like cookies were made by their parents. Many of the children around got along well with their parents and cooperated well. As Lu Benlei and Lung Nuan didn't interact much with one another, the two of them were busy with their own tasks. As a result, they weren't as fast as their parents. On top of that, it was inevitable that they would be flustered, and their work was a little messy. At first, little Kiki was quite happy. After all, it was the first time her parents had accompanied her to kindergarten for a parent-child activity. But as time went on, she realized that the people around her had a lot of teddy bears and other small animal biscuits coming out, but her parents hadn't come out at all. She immediately started to urge them, and her eyes turned red. Lu Benlei doted on little Kiki the most. Seeing that she didn't even cry, Lu Benlei immediately started coaxing her. As his interaction with Lung Nuan was too stiff, some of the parents nearby also noticed them. In order not to upset Kiki too much, and to prevent others from gossiping about her, Lu Benlei and Lung Nuan gradually began to interact with one another. Although they weren't as fast as the other parents, with their cooperation, cute animal biscuits fell into Coco's sight one by one. When the biscuits were sent into the oven, the kindergarten teacher arranged a new game for everyone while waiting for the biscuits to be cooked. It was a race. However, the premise was that the parents had to carry the baby with their left hand and right hand respectively. After the competition ended, the biscuits were almost done. Everyone took their biscuits to their own tables and began to taste the biscuits they had made. In some loving couples, the father would feed the mother, and the mother would feed the father, so Coco raised her head and made the same request. Lu Benlei and Lung Nuan didn't reject her, but Lu Benlei fed the biscuits smoothly. On the other hand, Lung Nuan had to be urged twice by Coco before she finally brought the biscuit to Lu Benlei's mouth. Lin Shi was Lung Ke's desk mate, so the two of them were sitting right next to each other. Seeing this sight, while munching on the biscuits she had made, Shi Yao leaned over to Lin Jia's ear and asked gleefully, "How is it? Do you think my idea is particularly good?" With a child around, it's the easiest to ease the atmosphere and promote affection. Good my ass. For this parent-child activity, not only did he send so many ovens to the kindergarten, he even spent money to hire a baker. That was what Lin Jie was thinking, but he had always adhered to the principles of a married couple. 1. The wife was always right, and 2. When the wife was wrong, he immediately replied without any hesitation, "My dear wife is right. Yes, my dear wife is right." Lin Jie, who hadn't eaten a single biscuit yet, lowered his head to look at the baking tray and saw that there was only one biscuit left. Just as he was about to take the biscuit, Shi Yao's hand reached over and snatched it away. Of course, he didn't dare to snatch Shi Yao away from her, so he turned his demonic claws to his son instead. At some point in time, little friend Lin Shi, who had been loitering around him a moment ago, had secretly taken a bunch of biscuits with him and was walking over to Lung Nuan, Lu Benlei, and little Keek's table. With an adorable look on his face, he offered them biscuits. "Uncle Lu, I'll treat you to some biscuits I made myself. Chapter 1087. Lin Jiej. Who did such a fawning and attentive son take after? Little crybaby, eat this. Little crybaby, don't you think this puppy looks a lot like you? You're the puppy. Coco's eyes reddened. Lin Jiej. Who did the son with such a cheap mouth take after? Had he not heard of this saying before? His mouth felt good for a moment, but the crematorium for chasing after his wife? It didn't take long for Kobayashi to return with the biscuits that Lung Wan and Lu Benlai had made for him in Lung Wan's bag. Little Snack took the biscuit and showed it to his parents like it was a treasure. Mom, look, this is the biscuit my godmother gave me. Daddy, look, little Kiki made this. Lin Jiej looked at his son's face. Nash's expression. You like it that much? Who did Nathaniel's personality take after? After the event was over, Lin Jiej, Shi Yao, Lu Benlai, and Lung Wan brought the two children out for a meal. While the atmosphere between Lu Benlai and Lung Wan wasn't particularly good, it was still much better than how Lung Wan had treated Lu Benlai so decisively before. After the meal, everyone dispersed because they had brought their children. While Lu Benlai was driving Lung Wan and Coco back, Coco accidentally rolled down the car window while they were waiting at a red light. Just as Lung Wan was about to press the button back, she saw a person standing by the roadside through the car window, a person whom she would remember even if he were to be reduced to ashes. Those dark, terrifying, and filthy images instantly swept into her mind. She couldn't help but tighten her grip on Coco. Mom, it hurts. Mom, you're too much. Kiki called out a few times, but Lung Wan didn't respond at all. Perplexed, Lu Benlai turned to look at Lung Wan. He called out to her a few times, but seeing that she was ignoring him, he followed her gaze and saw the man she was staring at. His expression immediately turned cold. It was the man who stopped him outside his company 4 years ago, and told him that he had slept with Lung Wan. It didn't take long for the red light to turn green. However, Lu Benlai's car didn't move at all. It was only when the traffic police came over to remind him that Lu Benlai finally snapped out of his daze and started the car. Lung Wan also came back to her senses. She apologized to Kiki while coaxing her. As the car continued driving forward, Lu Benlai would occasionally glance at Lung Wan through the rearview mirror. The woman was relatively calm, but the trembling of her fingertips and the fear between her brows were obvious. If that man was her ex, she wouldn't be acting like this. After all, if it was her ex, she might be feeling hatred or sadness, but she shouldn't be feeling fear and dread. She looked like she had seen a nightmare that she didn't want to touch. What exactly happened between her and that man? Lu Benlai was perplexed throughout the entire journey. Even after he sent Lung Wan and Kiki home, he still couldn't let go of this question. He thought about it for a very long time, but he couldn't think of any possibility. In the end, he gave his assistant a call. It seemed that there were some things that he really needed to investigate personally. Lin Jai stared at the items that she had thrown away only to be collected by Xia Shangzhou for a very, very long time before she finally came back to her senses. She was originally in the mood to turn on the computer to watch a movie, but now she was no longer in the mood. She returned the things to their original positions, closed the drawer, and stared out the window for a while. Then, for some reason, she suddenly wanted to call the GPS. Chapter 1088. She was in the mood to watch a movie on her computer, but in an instant she was no longer in the mood to do so. She returned the items back to their original positions, closed the drawer, and stared out the window for a moment. Then, for some reason, she suddenly felt the urge to call the navigator. That feeling grew stronger and stronger, and eventually Lin Jai used this impulse to really dial Xia Shangzhou's number. The phone rang once before it was picked up. Ms. Lin. In truth, Lin Jai didn't know what she wanted to talk to Xia Shangzhou about. She just wanted to make this call. So when she heard Xia Shangzhou's voice, she didn't know what she should say. Perhaps it was due to the lack of response from her end. Xia Shangzhou spoke up once more. Ms. Lin? Ms. Lin. Lin Jai suddenly knew what she was going to say. Navigator, I'm not your superior anymore, so can you stop calling me Ms. Lin? You're making it sound like I'm working even when I'm on vacation. Xia Shangzhou replied with the alright before he stumbled. He didn't know what he should call her. Miss Lin, Lin Jai, Sis Jai, or the Jai that he only dared to call her in his heart. This time it was Xia Shangzhou who fell silent. Lin Jai asked, "Why aren't you speaking?" "Nothing," Xia Shangzhou replied. "I'm just thinking about how I should address you. As long as you don't call me Miss Lin, you can call me whatever you want." Lin Jai tilted her head to the side and pondered for a moment before speaking up once more. "Don't call me Miss Lin either. And don't call me Big Sis Lin either. It makes me think of Little Sis Lin. Why don't I?" Lin Jai was just about to suggest calling her Big Sis Jai like Shi Yao did, but before she could say anything she suddenly froze. It was precisely because the navigator had called her Ms. Lin that she didn't like the sense of alienation that she felt from him, so she wanted him to change the way he addressed her. Big Sis Jai. This title was fine for Yao Yao, but it still felt a little weird when it was used on the navigator. Before Lin Jai could continue, Xia Shangzhou asked in bewilderment, "What did you say after that? Is there no signal? Why didn't I hear anything?" "I see." Lin Jai, who hadn't said a single word at all, nodded. She reined in her wandering thoughts and said, "How about this, navigator? You can call me Jai." "That's right, Jai. That sounds much better than Sis Jai." As Lin Jai nodded her head in approval, a resounding snap sounded from Xia Shangzhou's side. Lin Jai asked, "What's that sound?" "It's nothing. The dog accidentally knocked something over," Xia Shangzhou said as he bent over and rubbed his knee. "Oh, it's settled then. Don't call me Boss Lin anymore, just call me Jai instead," Lin Jai said with a smile. Then, as if teasing a snack, she turned to the phone and said, "Come, navigator, call me Jai." After saying those words, Lin Jai suddenly felt as if she wasn't toying with the GPS as a snack but a little brother. Could it be that she was old, and the old auntie's potential as a female gangster had been unearthed? Chapter 1089. His voice was soft and deep. Lin Jai's mind jolted by the word Jai. Jai Jai. Xia Shangzhou's voice echoed in her ears. She couldn't even remember how many times she had repeated it, but she soon realized that her heart was beating really fast, and her lips couldn't help but curl up into a smile. She never knew that her name could be called out in such a pleasant manner. It was even more pleasing to the ears than the music she played when she won a piano competition back when she was younger. There were many people who called her Jai, including Qin Ting. She hadn't been this happy when Qin Ting called her that. The navigator sure was an exception. On the other end of the line, Lin Jai was completely immersed in her own thoughts. On the other end of the line, Xia Shangzhou's heart was pounding furiously, and even his palms were covered in a layer of sweat. Even though she didn't know what was going on through the other end of the line, he was still afraid that she would see through his thoughts through that single word. After calming himself down, he hurriedly changed the topic. "Right? Did you call me for something?" It's nothing much." Lin Jai racked her brains for a moment before replying. "It's just that. Shall we go out for dinner tonight? I haven't been to Beijing World Hotel for a long time, and I suddenly feel like eating their crab tofu." "Oh sure." After replying to Lin Jai's words, Xia Shangzhou paused for 2 seconds before continuing, "I'm almost done here. I should be home in around an hour, so make some preparations. I'll be home by then, so let's head out for dinner." "All right." After hanging up the call, Lin Jai leaned against the chair for a moment before heading to the bathroom. After the incident with Qin Ting, she didn't bring anything with her when she left home. So after her shower, she rummaged through Xia Shangzhou's sink for a long time before she finally found a moisturizing cream and applied it on her face. After putting on her clothes, she opened the windows to feel the temperature outside, and she realized that it was much colder than it had been a few days ago. So she walked over to the wardrobe and opened it, intending to find Xia Shangzhou's thick coat to wear. Just like when she was in her own house, she tried on every single one of Xia Shangzhou's coats and looked at them in the mirror. As she took off the clothes one by one, she saw a neat row of boxes in his closet. Judging from the packaging, they were all luxury brands such as LV, Chanel, Gucci, Miu Miu, and her favorite Hermes. Why did the navigator have so many luxurious boxes? Is there something inside or not? Curious, Lin Jai stretched out her hand, pulled out a box and opened it. There was a pair of high heels inside. She knew that these were the most popular pair of shoes from the summer 2 years ago. She had been paying attention to them ever since the trailer was released, and she had even bought a pair of them. So it was not an empty box. With such a thought in mind, Lin Jai took out another box, and within it was a bracelet of the same design as well. Lin Jai continued to draw from the box, and this time she found a wallet in it. It was still the wallet that she liked in the past. Oh. Chapter 1090. She couldn't be any more familiar with this bag. She had posted it on her moments a while ago, and Qin Ting had even bought it for her later on. If she recalled correctly, on the day she received Qin Ting's bag, Navigator had coincidentally returned from his business trip, and she had seen a Chanel box on his desk. Back then, he had told her that it was a gift that his younger sister had asked him to bring for her. She didn't know if the box she saw that day was this box, putting aside whether his younger sister really asked him to bring a gift for her or not. Even if the box I saw that day really belonged to his younger sister, why would he collect so many luxurious items? Not to mention they are all luxurious items for women. Lin Jai's doubts deepened. She continued to open the boxes, and every single item she opened was something that she had once liked. Isn't this a little too much of a coincidence? They are all things that I used to like. Lin Jai casually picked up a jewelry box containing earrings, opened it, closed it, and then opened it again. She played around with the box absent-mindedly for a moment before accidentally dropping the packaging from the box. She hurriedly picked up the packaging, and just as she was about to put it back into the box, she realized that there was a note on the floor together with the packaging. Lin Jai picked it up in bewilderment and saw a line of tiny words written on it. She recognized it as Xia Shangzhou's handwriting. When I sent her home today, she was chatting with her friend in the car, and she said that she liked this earring. After I sent her home, I happened to pass by SKP on my way back. It wasn't closed yet, so I went in to take a look, and I didn't expect to see this earring that had just arrived. So I bought it. But just like before, there's no reason for me to give it to her. Ungiven gift 8. It can't be that there's a note in every box, can it? With this thought in mind, Lin Jai began flipping through the boxes once more. When I accompanied her to the client's office, she was reading fashion magazines and saw the latest clothes. She seemed to like them and said that she would see if she could buy them when she went on a business trip to Hong Kong. In the end, she had something to do and couldn't go on a business trip to Hong Kong. I went alone and went to several shopping malls when I was free. Finally, I found this dress. But even if I bought it, I still didn't have the right to give it to her. I saw her post on WeChat Moments. She said that she liked the latest model of this bag. I paid special attention to it for a long time and finally ordered it. But before I got the bag, she had already bought it and carried it for a week. Actually, there was no need to buy it. Even if she bought it, no one would use it. But she still bought it. She doesn't understand herself. This bracelet is quite beautiful, but it's also quite expensive. It's made of small diamonds, and the branding fee takes up 2/3 of the price. Nevertheless, it suits her. And it's also what she likes. She didn't have that much money, so she only bought a single bracelet. In order to match this bracelet, she bought a whole set of jewelry from this series. I saw her wearing it at the charity banquet, and it's very beautiful. Ungiven gift 21. Upon seeing this bracelet, Lin Jai vaguely knew who Xia Shangzhou was writing about. Chapter 1091. I know this style of bag. She has no less than 8 of them, but she will still buy the new ones when she sees them. I asked her, what's the difference between this and the one you carried before? She replied confidently, the color is different. Fine, the color is indeed different. Gift 14 that has not been given. Lin Jai looked through the notes one by one, and when she saw the last one, she was certain that the person Xia Shangzhou was writing was her. Because the words, the color is different, had come from her mouth. When I was on a business trip, I saw her post this bag on her WeChat Moments. This bag was the same as the other things I bought before. I didn't give it away, but someone did what I've always wanted to do. He bought a bag that she liked and gave it to her. She was very happy and even agreed to be that person's girlfriend. After she came out of the office, she saw the box I bought. When she asked me about it, I thought for a moment that I should give this bag to her and ask her if she was willing to be my girlfriend. But it was just a thought. I replied very timidly that this was a gift that my sister asked me to bring. I had no choice, I had to be timid. After all, to me, she was like the bright moon in the sky, the snow lotus on the mountain. She wasn't someone that I could reach out my hand and touch. Ungiven gift 36. This note was taken from the Chanel box. So, the box she saw the other day was really this box. He had bought all of these things for her. Some of them were things she had casually said she liked, some of them were things she really liked from the bottom of her heart, and some of them were things she had casually mentioned without much thought. In truth, it didn't matter what she thought of them. What was important was that he had thought that she liked them, so he had collected them all. But he clearly didn't dare to give them to her. And he didn't dare to let her know that he liked her. He knew that none of these things would ever land in her hands, so why did he still do it so foolishly? Lin Jai could clearly feel a tinge of gratitude creeping into her heart. In truth, it had been many years since she had been moved. As she grew older and matured, she slowly realized that she could live a good life without relying on a man. She had already given herself a good life, and she had never wronged herself before. As a result, there were very few things that could truly move her. But the navigator had moved her time and time again, and it was always the smallest of details. Yet, it was able to accurately strike at the softest spot in her heart. While Lin Jai was in a daze, her phone rang. It was Xia Shangzhou, telling her that he would be home in 10 minutes. After hanging up the call, Lin Jai quickly composed herself and placed the boxes back to their original positions. Then she hung up Xia Shangzhou's clothes one by one, making it seem as if she hadn't opened the wardrobe at all. After which, she quickly changed into her shoes and headed down the stairs. Xia Shangzhou was already waiting downstairs. He had hailed a cab back home, so he didn't get it to leave. As soon as he saw Lin Jai walking out of the building, he immediately got out of the car and opened the door for her. From the moment he met Lin Jai until dinner, Xia Shangzhou couldn't help but feel that there was something on her mind. But when he tried to take a closer look at her expression, he couldn't see anything amiss. She was talking and laughing, completely different from how she usually was. He couldn't help but suspect that it was just his imagination. Chapter 1092. After dinner, Xia Shangzhou asked, "Going home?" Lin Jai pondered for a moment before asking, "Do you have anything on tonight?" Xia Shangzhou shook his head. "No, what's wrong? If you're free, why don't we go to a nearby mall to watch a movie?" Watching a movie? That's something only couples do. Xia Shangzhou's fingers trembled nervously for a moment before he nodded. "All right." After which, he calmed his fluctuating emotions and asked, "What movie do you want to watch?" "Let's watch the movie that's being promoted all over the world recently." "All right," Xia Shangzhou replied before taking out his phone to book the tickets. The seats for the 8 p.m. show aren't too good, but the 9:20 p.m. show has a good seat, so I'll book it for the 9:20 p.m. show. Do you think it's fine? Sure. Xia Shangzhou tapped on the screen for a moment before raising his head and replying to Lin Jai, "I've booked the tickets, but it's only 7:30 p.m. right now. Do you want to head over now or wait a little longer?" "Let's head over now. We can still take a look around the mall." Xia Shangzhou had no objections to that. The mall was right behind the Beijing World Hotel, and it would only take 3 to 5 minutes to get there on foot. Lin Jai and Xia Shangzhou arrived at the first floor of the mall before 7:40 p.m. Lin Jai didn't buy anything. She just picked up a few of the brands that she liked and walked around casually. When it was about time, she and Xia Shangzhou headed to the basement. Before entering the theater, Lin Jai didn't forget to buy 2 cups of cola and a large bucket of popcorn. Due to the movie's new release, the seats were still full. Lin Jai was halfway through her cola when the movie started. The plot was simply too ordinary, but the setting was indeed beautiful, and the actors were beautiful as well. But in the past few years, be it television series or movies, it had always been these few actors who acted in them. Lin Jai focused her attention on the movie for 20 minutes before she couldn't take it anymore. She lowered her head to look at her phone. However, due to the bright light coming from her phone, Lin Jai didn't dare to look at it for too long. In the end, she couldn't bear to watch the movie anymore. And her phone didn't work either. After finishing her cola and popcorn, she fell asleep out of boredom. By the time she woke up, the movie had already ended. She moved her head slightly, and only then did she realize that she was leaning on Xia Shangzhou's shoulder at some point. As for the navigator next to him, he maintained a posture in his seat, not daring to move at all. Lin Jai quickly sat up straight and combed her hair. She was the one who suggested watching a movie, but in the end she ended up leaning on his shoulder and snoring away. Feeling a little embarrassed, she said, "That? Movies are really too boring." It's indeed rather boring. Seeing that Lin Jai had stood up, Xia Shangzhou also stood up as well. While Lin Jai was tidying up her clothes, she noticed that Xia Shangzhou's arm had trembled a little when he reached for the Coke bottle. Did his arm go numb from all the leaning? Lin Jai pursed her lips, but before Xia Shangzhou could reach for the Coke bottle once more, she had already snatched it away from him and pretended as if she hadn't noticed anything at all as she said, "Let's go." Then he took the lead and walked towards the exit of the cinema. It was already getting late, so there weren't many people or cars on the streets. It was fortunate that Xia Shangzhou had booked a car in advance, and it was parked right across the street. While Lin Jai and Xia Shangzhou were crossing the street, a car with its blinding headlights suddenly sped toward them. "Be careful." Xia Shangzhou was the first to notice it, and he subconsciously called out to warn Lin Jai. Lin Jai shot a surprised glance at Xia Shangzhou. She hadn't even noticed the car when Xia Shangzhou had suddenly pulled her to the side. Before she could even steady herself, the car had already sped past her, bringing with it a gust of wind. Still in a state of shock, she raised her head to take a look and memorized the license plate number. Chapter 1093. After helping Lin Jai up, Xia Shangzhou immediately asked, "Are you alright?" Lin Jai didn't respond. She stared intently at the car that was gradually getting further and further away. Noticing Lin Jai's silence, Xia Shangzhou thought that she was injured somewhere, so he asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Are you injured somewhere?" As he spoke, Xia Shangzhou assessed Lin Jai from head to toe. Recovering from her daze, Lin Jai shook her head at Xia Shangzhou before glancing in the direction of the car once more before replying to Xia Shangzhou, "I'm fine." The car was already out of sight, but Lin Jai still stared into the distance for a moment before turning her gaze back to Xia Shangzhou. "What about you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Xia Shangzhou replied worriedly. "Are you sure you're not injured anywhere?" "I'm fine," Lin Jai replied with a faint smile. Only then did Xia Shangzhou calm down. "Let's hurry up then. The weather is a little cold, and you're not wearing much either. Don't catch a cold." Without saying a word, Lin Jai raised her leg. Perhaps it was due to the previous interlude, Xia Shangzhou was much more cautious when crossing the road. After getting into the car, Xia Shangzhou told the driver the address. The driver replied with the "all right" before stepping on the accelerator. As the car slowly moved forward, Lin Jai inadvertently glanced out of the window and caught sight of a familiar figure. She subconsciously shouted, "Stop the car!" And the driver leaped in fright. He abruptly stepped on the brakes, and by the time she looked out of the window, the figure had already disappeared. "What's wrong?" Xia Shangzhou followed Lin Jai's gaze, only to see an empty road ahead. Lin Jai shook her head. "It's nothing. I might have been mistaken." "What mistake?" Xia Shangzhou asked curiously. Lin Jai wasn't in a hurry to respond to Xia Shangzhou's words. Instead, she turned to the driver and said, "Let's go. I thought that I saw someone familiar, but there wasn't anyone." "Oh." Xia Shangzhou responded and did not ask any further questions. Lin Jai didn't say anything else either. It was very quiet in the car, but her eyes, which Xia Shangzhou didn't notice, gradually turned cold as she looked out the window. Although she didn't see anything when she looked over, she was certain that she wasn't mistaken. That familiar figure was definitely Qin Ting. Why was he on the road in the middle of the night? For some reason, Lin Jai couldn't help but recall the car that had nearly crashed into her earlier. She didn't know if she was too sensitive, but she felt that the scene just now wasn't purely an accident. With this thought in mind, Lin Jai took out her phone and sent a message to her assistant. After returning home, Lin Jai first went to take a shower. By the time she came out, it was already 12:30. She climbed onto her bed and coincidentally her phone screen lit up. Her assistant had replied to the message she had sent her earlier. "Boss Lin, I've contacted the driver. He does know Mr. Chin, and he told me that Mr. Chin asked him to help him create a scene of a hero saving a damsel in distress. The driver repeatedly assured me that he didn't want to do anything to you. He also said that Mr. Chin was right next to him. His main purpose was to put on a show of self-injury. Sure enough, that driver was related to Chin Ting." Chapter 1094. This kind of person sure is ruthless. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jai lowered her head and replied to her assistant, "I understand. Then Boss Lin, if there's nothing else, I'll be heading to bed." Lin Jai replied with a, "All right." She put down her phone, and roughly 2 minutes later, she picked it up again and sent another message to her assistant. "Right, have you settled the matter I asked you to help me with?" "It's done. I'm awaiting your instructions." Lin Jai had barely finished reading her assistant's message when another message appeared on her screen. "Boss Lin, if you've decided to do it, please inform me in advance. After all, it'll take some time to prepare. Then get ready tomorrow morning. Let me know one day in advance." "Yes, Boss Lin." Lin Jai didn't respond to her assistant's message. After putting down her phone, she stared at the night sky outside the window, and her expression turned cold. She didn't want to make a move so soon, but Chin Ting had clearly gone mad. He had resorted to a car accident this time, but was he going to come up with something even more disgusting next time? Fortunately, they had the GPS today. If they didn't have it, based on her situation at that time, she might have been knocked to the ground before he could save the damsel in distress. Forget it. There's no need to waste my time with such a person. After the parent-child activity at the kindergarten, Lung Wan didn't see Lu Benlai at her apartment for an entire week. Countless possibilities surfaced in her mind. Was he sick? Or was he in trouble? Or did he suddenly run out of patience and didn't want to wait outside her building day in and day out anymore? Such speculations would surface in Lung Wan's mind almost every night, so much so that she almost asked Shiryao about Lu Benlai's situation several times over the phone. Lu Benlai guessed that there must be some kind of secret between Lung Wan and that man. Before he found out the truth, he couldn't figure out what had happened between the two of them, but he didn't expect that the ending he found out would leave him filled with so much regret that he couldn't help but want to give himself 2 tight slaps. The day after Lu Benlai decided to investigate the matter between Lung Wan and that man, he brought his secretary back to the city where Lung Wan's parents lived. Naturally, he didn't meet Lung Wan's parents directly. Instead, he learned about Lung Wan's situation from her parents' neighbors. In the end, it was an old lady who told him that Lung Wan's parents weren't from this area. She had only moved here about 10 years ago, and the old lady of the neighborhood said that they were here to treat their daughter's illness. They said that their daughter was a retard who couldn't speak and was afraid to meet others. The old lady also said that she had lived here for more than a decade, and she had only met Lung Wan twice. The first time was when she was delivering community welfare to Lung Wan's family, and they bumped into each other in the living room. However, Lung Wan didn't even greet her. In fact, she even hid back into her room out of fear. The second time she met her was when she was admitted into G University. She still didn't like to speak much, but when she saw her, she smiled at her. As the old madam spoke, she complimented Lung Wan's beauty, saying that she was the prettiest girl she had seen in the 10 years she had lived here. Chapter 1095. It could be seen that the old lady was a chatterbox. After telling Lu Benlai everything he knew, she even told him something bizarre. "Do you know? That girl is so pretty. She should be around 26 or 27 years old now, right? Maybe even older. Logically speaking, when she's at the age of marriage, there should be quite a lot of people going to their house to introduce her to a husband. But I don't know why, but her mother directly rejected them. She said that their daughter doesn't want to get married. She even said that as long as their daughter is happy, it's fine. She doesn't need to get married. Are you stupid? Which woman doesn't want to get married? The more Lu Benlai listened, the more he felt that something was amiss. When he asked the old lady again, the old lady shook her head and said she didn't know. She didn't know anything else. Lu Benlai could tell that the old lady wasn't trying to hide anything from him. So he asked where Lung Wan's family had moved from. The old lady wasn't too sure, but judging from her accent, it seemed like they were from S City. Seeing that he was unable to get any more information out of her, Lu Benlai thanked the old lady before returning to the hotel. After which, he had his secretary continue to look into the matter. Due to the long period of time that had passed, it took a lot of effort before he managed to find Lung Wan's hometown. The old madam was right. Lung Wan was indeed from S City, but it was just a town under S City. Lu Benlai felt that the answers he was looking for should be in Lung Wan's hometown. Thus, he had his secretary book a high-speed rail ticket and rushed over to that small town. The town was actually quite beautiful, with verdant hills and clear waters. Other than the inconvenient transportation, there were almost no other shortcomings. By the time Lu Ben arrived in town, it was already midnight. He found a guest house to stay in, and while chatting with the owner of the guest house, he asked if there were any old shops in town. Then he learned that the roast chicken shop in the west of town had been in business for several generations. Lu Benlai knew that in a small town like this, no matter what happened to a family, every family would know about it. Thus, the longer one stayed here, the more they would know about the incident that happened 10 years ago. The next morning, Lu Benlai headed to the roasted chicken restaurant. He didn't beat around the bush, saying that he was from Beijing and wanted to understand the situation there. After which, he mentioned Lung Wan's name. Upon hearing the words Lung Wan, the lady boss of the roasted chicken shop immediately asked, "You know Lan Wan? Is she doing well now? Are you still as silly as before? Was Lung Wan a fool?" Lu Benlai was perplexed, but he still replied honestly, "I know her. We're university classmates and she's doing quite well at the moment. She's working at a very good foreign corporation in Beijing." When the lady boss heard this, she immediately smiled in relief. "That's really a good thing. I was really afraid that the girl would be ruined just like that." "It was destroyed?" Lu Benlai couldn't help but ask, "Why did you say that? Also, I think she's pretty smart. Why do you say she's stupid?" Chapter 1096. It's just the street in front of us. Back then there weren't many cars in the area, so the kids would often play with rubber bands here. Little Lan Wan would often come here to play, and she's a very sensible girl. Sometimes when I'm moving things around, she'll even come over to help me. Her mother's craftsmanship is amazing, and the dresses she makes for her are especially beautiful. Sometimes when her mother comes back from a big city, she'll also bring back exquisite dresses for her. Right, I forgot to tell you. Back then, their family was one of the wealthiest in our town. We all thought that little Lan Wan would have the potential to enter a university and earn big bucks in the future, but it's a pity that that incident happened. The lady boss had mentioned that incident twice in a row, and Lu Benlai realized that this was the main point he was looking for. "Lady boss, can you tell me what happened?" The lady boss stuttered and didn't continue. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about it. The reason why I'm here is to find out what happened to her in the past. To tell you the truth, she's actually the mother of my child now. All the more reason why I can't tell you about it. What if you despise her if I tell you?" No, lady boss, there's really no need for you to worry about that. I can only help her if I know what happened to her in the past. So in the end, she still hasn't walked out of it after all these years. But that's true. After all, who can walk out of it just like that? The lady boss's words made Lu Benlai even more eager to know the truth. After assuring the lady boss for a long time, the lady boss finally relented. Something happened to little Lass when she was 15. Something happened to little girl Nguyen when she was 15. At that time, her mother enrolled her in a cram school. Every weekend, she had to go to the teacher's house for cram lessons. The teacher who taught her was Teacher Zhang. Because of little girl Nguyen's incident, he lost his job. But it wasn't Teacher Zhang's fault. It was Teacher Zhang's nephew. He's a local hooligan in our town, and he learned everything. That brat probably saw that little girl Nguyen was pretty, so he set his eyes on little girl Nguyen. Later on, after little girl Nguyen finished her cram lessons, her parents might have been busy, so they didn't pick her up. That was the only time they didn't pick her up, and that brat targeted her. That's right, 4 years ago, that man was released from prison. I think he was in Beijing. This morning, as soon as Lin Jai woke up, she received a message from her assistant. Boss Lin, I've already arranged everything for you. Let's meet at the Beijing World Hotel at 6 tonight. Is that okay? Sure. After replying to her assistant's message, Lin Jai got up and washed up before heading to the living room. Just like every other day, Xia Shangzhou had already prepared breakfast. Upon seeing her, he immediately greeted her with a morning greeting and beckoned her over for breakfast. Lin Jai stared at Xia Shangzhou for a moment before walking over. She pulled out a chair and sat down. She picked up the youtiao that Xia Shangzhou passed over and took a bite. After which, she raised her head and looked at Xia Shangzhou. Navigator. Chapter 1097. Lin Jai stared at Xia Shangzhou for a moment before she walked over, pulled out a chair and sat down. She picked up the youtiao that Xia Shangzhou passed over, and took a bite before raising her head to look at Xia Shangzhou. Navigator. Xia Shangzhou scooped a cup of soy milk for Lin Jai as he replied with a soft hum. Lin Jai paused for a few seconds before saying, I'm leaving. Xia Shangzhou's fingers trembled slightly, seemingly unable to comprehend the meaning behind her words. It took a long while before he raised his head to look at Lin Jai and asked, You're leaving? Yes. Thank you for taking me in all this while, but I'll have to return to work eventually, and I'll have to return to where I belong. Indeed, no matter how happy I've been lately, it's only temporary. She'll have to leave sooner or later. From the start to the end, she's never belonged to him. I should be very satisfied that she's been able to stay with me for so long. With such thoughts in mind, Xia Shangzhou lowered his head, fearing that Lin Jai would notice something from his expression. He tried his best to calm his emotions before he finally spoke up. Do you want to go straight to the company or go home? Do you need me to send you? There's no need for that. I'll get my assistant to pick me up. She'll be here around 8:10 a.m. Xia Shangzhou replied with an "oh" before placing the soy milk in front of Lin Jai. Thank you. Lin Jai added some sugar into the soy milk, stirred it a little, and took 2 sips with a gentle expression on her face. Xia Shangzhou stood at the opposite side of the table, dazed for a moment before he glanced at the clock on the living room wall. It was already almost 8 a.m. There were only 10 minutes left before she would leave. He stared at the clock for a moment before turning his gaze back to Lin Jai. He gazed at her beautiful face, and his lips twitched a little, but in the end, he still couldn't bring himself to say it. Indeed, it wasn't that he couldn't bring himself to say it, but that he didn't have the right to say it. He wanted to ask her if she would still come to his house in the future. He wanted to ask her if he could look for her more often in the future. But he really didn't have the right to say those words. He wasn't worthy of her, so he couldn't play those ambiguous games with her for his own selfish desires. Silently, Xia Shangzhou scooped himself a bowl of soy milk before sitting down in front of Lin Jai and munching on his breakfast in a daze. In fact, every morning in the past, he and she would eat these things and he would always feel extremely satisfied. But today, no matter how much sugar was added, he still felt that the soybean milk was bitter. Before she could finish her breakfast, Lin Jai's phone suddenly rang. It was a call from her assistant. She was already downstairs. Lin Jai was almost done with her breakfast. She raised her head to look at Xia Shangzhou, who hadn't eaten much yet, and after a moment of contemplation, she turned to her assistant and said, Wait a moment for her. After Xia Shangzhou finished his breakfast, Lin Jai offered to help him tidy up the table, but Xia Shangzhou simply smiled and said, There's no need for that. I'll do it myself. A moment later, Xia Shangzhou said, Isn't your assistant here already? If you have something to do, then go and do it. Lin Jai replied with an as she sat on the chair for a while longer before saying, I'll be taking my leave then. If there's anything, let's keep in touch via phone. Xia Shangzhou was so flustered that he blurted out the word, okay, twice. After that, he could not say anything else and went to wash the dishes. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.